Show, presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. The show will, of course, officially launch coming up on Monday morning, 6 until 9 a.m. But you already know that because you listened to or watched Thursday's Dry Run show in the wake of the announcement taking place at the state capitol on Saturday for the Center of the American Experiment, America 250 block party. So you're aware of all of those things. I am your host, John Justice, and with me is Isaac, producer, who is helping us navigate all of making sure that the equipment works appropriately. This is why we test.
This is why we test.
This is why we test. 612-584-4565. That is the comment line. If you'd like to leave us a comment at any point throughout the show, we're looking forward to sharing those with you. And that will be, apart from the email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. That will be the primary way to interact with the show through our comment line at 612-584-4565. So be sure that you lock that in. I think that we decided yesterday that speed dial was antiquated. Nobody uses that anymore.
Correct.
So create a new contact in your phone.
Yes. There you go.
That sounds lame.
Create a new contact in your phone to make sure you can leave a comment.
It's not very flashy. Kind of like comment line.
But then everyone can have your contact in their phone.
All right.
That feels fun.
I'm liking you. I mean, I liked you already. We haven't worked together a lot. Right? I liked you already. But I'm liking you more and more every day.
Well, that's good after our technical difficulties.
We're on the same wavelength. Yeah. So jokes on everybody else. We're going to have to go longer. After 9 o'clock this morning because we're about 45 minutes behind. You see, now that I'm no longer working for Me Muscle, I can go and actually mention when we have technical difficulties because apparently we did a whole half hour of the show and nobody could hear me.
I thought you sounded good.
Thank you. I thought it was great. I really did.
I
thought specifically, you probably appreciated all of the wonderful comments I made about my beautiful wife during that. I mean, the whole segment was about my wife Melinda and just what a fantastic wife and mother she is. I'm only saying that because she's one of the individuals who's listening while we do this dry run. And so I did bring her up earlier, but more talking about the fact that she wanted me to bring multiple shirts today to decide which one looked best on camera. To my point that I was talking about with Isaac earlier, it is a great idea. I appreciate that my wife is looking out for me. That being said, I told Isaac I got bigger fish to fry, and boy, that was the case this morning. No doubt about that.
Correct.
Right. If my okay, good. My wife sent me. It is the John Justice Show presented by Center of the American Experiment, and you are listening to the John Justice Show replay, the Dry Run Freedom Friday show from last week. The live show begins at 6 a.m. Central Time. Now back to the John Justice Show replay. I'm wearing an Alex Bowman NASCAR shirt, and that's because my favorite driver since Dale Earnhardt Jr. retired some 10 years ago is Alex Bowman, who announced yesterday that he is retiring from NASCAR following next season. So it's a little bit bittersweet for me. Like a fan of any sport, when a player that you love leaves the game, when a driver that you love decides they're going to retire, it's always one of those things that, oh man, what a bummer. But I get to enjoy him for another year and a half. An individual who I feel a kinship with because of how he came up in his racing career. He suffered a lot of physical ailments, concussion, broke his back, vertigo earlier this year, and there was a lot of question marks surrounding whether or not he would return to NASCAR. Another aspect of that, by the way, that I wanted to mention is we were discussing this earlier, but there's this thing in fandom now, and it's not exclusive to pop culture. You see it within news as well, but you see it in sports. There's this nasty turn in terms of fandom where people want to root for things to go wrong. Like people are rooting for Avengers Doomsday to fail. I mean, it's just a movie, but this is where fandoms are. I mean, social media perpetuates this within the cultural zeitgeist. And the same thing rings true for NASCAR. And Alex Bowman has been sort of a favorite whipping boy among NASCAR fans for a number of different reasons. So there's a relatability for me as well, especially, and I can use the example recently where we've been making the announcements in the run-up to the official launch of the show coming up on Monday. And the foes of the show have been coming out of the woodwork online as of late, which is really fun. You know, I don't care about you and your show, but let me go ahead and randomly comment completely unprovoked on the fact that you shared a logo on X yesterday. You loser. It's so weird. You know, for somebody who says they don't care, you certainly act like you care.
And it's a nice logo.
It's a beautiful logo.
Thank you.
Yeah. Somebody asked me if I made it yesterday. I said yeah. I'm just kidding. I did not. I did not say it. I would not steal that thunder from you. Isaac was the one who took care of our took care of our
unless
logo.
they don't like it, then go ahead.
That's true. We will be talking about Mike Lindell and why he's decided to tackle this amnesty plan, because that's what it is. They can spin it all they want. They can absolutely spin it all they want, but it is absolutely an amnesty plan. So we have some audio of Mike Lindell that we'll share coming up. Also, in just a moment, Trump weighs massive new strike on Iran. I have some audio to share, comments from Marco Rubio to get into. When it comes to Mike Lindell, just really quick, when it comes to Mike Lindell, we'll get into the details of his plan and how they simply can't run from the fact that this is amnesty. But the other part to this, and I may have found the answers, I just don't understand why he's dealing with this at all. We've got half a dozen to a dozen issues to take care of, to talk about, to handle here in Minnesota. Why is he bringing up anything regarding illegal immigration that cannot be handled at the state level? Because even as governor, he has no control over that. In the midst of my research, I think I may have stumbled across the answer. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you coming up a little bit later on in the show, and probably when our guests join us in studio on a Freedom Friday. We'll have Grace Keating and Catherine Johnson from the American Experiment podcast. And to that point, you know, they've been focusing, and American Experiment has been focusing on the key issues facing Minnesotans and what's most important for voters in making their decision of who they end up voting for in the primary and, of course, in the general election coming up in November, which just goes and sort of reinforces this thought in my mind and question that I have of why is Mike Lindell's campaign even bringing this up? And like I said, I think I may have the answer for you. I'll share that with you again coming up a little bit later on. I do have a clip. Speaking of those issues here at Center of the American Experiment that they're focusing on. Catherine and Grace have been talking about it and posting clips online. I have a short montage of a few of those clips from the American Experiment podcast that I'll share with you here in just a moment. Before I do, though, I want to make one quick comment that I didn't make yesterday when talking about what happened with my former employer, who shall not be named, Me Muscle. And I just want to quickly say, and I didn't say it yesterday, that I don't have any animosity at all to what happened with my former employer. I knew when I first got into radio and throughout the entirety of my 30-year career, I made a choice to get into entertainment, doing thing with my fingers. No, we need that T-shirt. By the way, we need a doing that thing. Because are you familiar with doing that thing with my fingers in the show at all? I know you've listened somewhat on Fridays, but you're a little newer.
I'm a little newer.
So early on, when I started doing talk radio, you know, I would go through stories like I have the one here about Iran and a massive strike on Iran and all this stuff. And you get into the story, and there would be things that were quoted. And for some reason, I didn't like saying, as was quoted. So I started doing that thing with my fingers. Whenever I reach a quote in a story, and so now it's become a thing. Doing that thing with my fingers. No, but when I got into radio, I knew that I was getting into an industry that was volatile, and that if the company who was relying on me to make money decides that my services are no longer needed, and that's exactly what they said to me. For whatever reason, and this was not a local decision. In the early part of my radio career, you could control your destiny. As long as you had great ratings and you were successful, you were bringing in money, revenue, endorsements. It was great. Times have changed. I was having a tremendous amount of success, probably the most success that I had had at Me Muscle in the time that I had been there, and certainly in the time that I had taken over as host of the show in the wake of the passing of my dear friend Drew Lee, who was doing the show with me. The show had been as successful as ever. But Me Muscle's dealing with their own financial issues under a mountain of debt, some corporate bean counter, and I'm not even using that as a pejorative, it's just a reality. Some corporate bean counter decided that I was one of those individuals who they could cut in order to balance their budget seats at the end of a quarter. And that's budget sheets, not seats. Is budget seat even a thing? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So we'll just let's start over again. We're gonna stop the feed. Just kidding. Now we got everything up and working. I'm not gonna do that. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned because throughout talking about the story yesterday, I didn't bring up the fact that I really harbor no ill will, and certainly not for anybody in the offices in St. Louis Park, because none of them even knew that was the case. And even if it was an internal decision, and it wasn't, but even if it was, that's okay. Hey man, I chose to be in this job. That's 100% on me. Now it's a completely different ballgame here at Center of the American Experiment, because you let me go here and I'm going to burn it all down. Just joking. Everybody's just like, what? What has happened? I was joking with Grace yesterday because we have to connect our program to do the show to multiple streaming outlets. Because I made a list. You're going to be able to listen or watch the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment on no less than 10 different feeds. Which is pretty incredible. This is what you can do now. It's amazing. And I firmly believe this is where radio is going, as I mentioned on the show yesterday. But I had to get access to all of the Center of the American Experiment social media accounts. And I was joking with Grace. Like, this was all one big ruse. So that I could just get access to all of the social media accounts. And I'm gonna sell them off to Drechos de Humanos and let them go and take over all your feeds. All right, coming up. We do have our guests in studio. Trump is weighing a massive news strike on Iran. Could be larger than Operation Epic Fury. And we'll continue the thought of why the media has gotten bored with the war, and then we'll dive into the issue of voting. Why is Mike Lindell tackling illegal immigration? I do not understand. But speaking of the American Experiment podcast, here is a montage of a couple of moments you might have missed from some of the more recent American Experiment podcasts with Katherine Johnson and Grace Keating, available at AmericanExperiment.org here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
The legislature passed a new social media warning law that requires social media companies to display a mental health warning label to users on their sites. The label's text must warn the user of potential mental health impacts from using social media and provide additional potential mental health resources, including the National Suicide Hotline number and website. So the law also bars platforms from allowing a user to disable the warning label or provide it in the terms and conditions, basically do anything so that it's not super irate. The Trump administration has actually sued Minnesota in order to get them to hand over their SNAP records from the last 5 years. Minnesota has refused to share this information voluntarily, so the administration took them and some other states to court. The U.S. Department of Agriculture said it's pursuing the data to check for fraud and waste and is seeking the program's eligibility and benefit transaction records. As Attorney General Todd Blanche said in a statement, the American people deserve a government that is transparent about how its spends their hard-earned tax dollars.
We wanted to start off this week's episode with a little update from something we talked about last week, which was, of course, the Minneapolis bathhouse situation, which it sounds like are now legal in the great city of Minneapolis, right, Catherine?
Woohoo! It was legalized, fully legalized, signed off by Mayor Jacob Fry on Pride weekend. We even have a clip of it to show you guys. Go ahead, Isaac.
This is the bathhouse ordinance. Everybody ready?
And that's City Hall, by the way. That's Minneapolis City Hall. People are struggling to get by, especially in our middle-class families across the state. So you would think that the city council would be doing something about this, right? Well, sort of. Here's what they are doing. They entered into a $1.4 million contract with a firm to provide coaching and counseling between council members and Mayor Fry's office.
Oh, boy.
For executive coaching and mediation to improve teamwork. The City Council is also continuing to reduce main roadways like Hennepin Avenue to one lane in each direction and eliminating parking to enhance bike and mass transit access.
That should be great for businesses, right?
Yeah,
that should be great for economic activity.
They opposed ordinances on enforcement of livability issues such as loitering, begging, spitting on sidewalks, possessing drug paraphernalia, and what they call urban camping.
Wait, so they stopped people from passing rules against those things?
Like ordinances on enforcement of livability issues such as loitering, begging, spitting on sidewalks, possessing drug paraphernalia, and what they call urban camping.
Wait, so they stopped people from passing rules against those things? Like they're pro-loitering.
They're pro-drug paraphernalia. Homeless encampment. I'm not kidding.
Again, great for economic activity. This is really going to make Minneapolis like a thriving hub that people with children want to visit and spend their money at.
Last but not least, they hosted the first ever transgender drag show in Minneapolis City Hall to honor Pride Month in 2026.
Thank
Good here when you talk about fewer regulations on child care centers is people worry about safety because there are issues with safety in child care centers. It's not frequent at all, but it always hits the news when there's an incident that happens, and it's sad, it's awful, it breaks your heart, So if we were to reduce regulations, would that make child care centers less safe? Or how do you balance those two needs?
Yeah, that's a really good point because a lot of that fear really goes down to what is happening, in that center when the parents leave their children. What some of the studies found, though, was that a lot of the places where those kinds of incidents happened were providers that weren't following the rules that were on the book. So you didn't necessarily need new rules. You just needed to make sure that the rules that you have on the book have been followed by all.
And those were a series of clips from the American Experiment podcast, out every Tuesday, hosted by Catherine Johnson. Grace Keating will be joining us shortly here in studio on a dry run Freedom Friday. It's a John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. You can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Also, if you want to leave a comment, this is the best way to communicate with the show. 612-584-4565. 612-584-4565. I don't have that. I made the mistake yesterday. I thought, you know what? Usually I go the route of making sure I've got a bunch of notes in front of me, especially when I'm starting a new show. And oh my gosh, how many radio stations have I actually had to do a transition from? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different times I've had to go through this. Well, it's been 30 years, so if you start doing a lot of those were in very quick succession in the first 7 years of my career. The past 20 have been a lot more stable. But when you start a new show, you become so accustomed to the call letters, the phone number of the previous show that you worked for. I'm always paranoid when I start a new show that I'm going to go and say something wrong. I'm going to give out the wrong call letters, right? Because it's one of those little things that other people don't really care that much, but they will mock you incessantly for it. It's the same thing when it comes to guest titles, military rankings. I get the most embarrassed when I go and screw up somebody who's been elected to office, and I put him in the House instead of the Senate, or I put him in the Senate. I had that happen with Eric Lucero about a year and a half ago. Probably longer than that. Time all runs together. But he had redistricting that took place.
The best part of waking up is knowing my life lost to Trump.
He speaks through static waves at dawn. A voice that lingers when night is gone. Twin cities hum with stories spun. John Justice rides the rising sun. Zima fizz in a plastic cup. Star Wars dreams keep lifting him up. Costco aisles is sacred ground where neon shadows spin around.
It's the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, AmericanExperiment.org, and welcome to our official debut. I have to say thank you once again to Center of the American Experiment for seeing the vision that I had relating to my departure from the previous radio station, and now the ability to start the show up once again and provide to you the show that I know that you expect on a daily basis. This is really going to be a fun journey as we begin this new chapter in the John Justice Show. Of course, we're streaming live at AmericanExperiment.org, also on the MixLR app, which you can download for free. The show is available as well up on YouTube and Facebook. And as we work through the beginning of the official start of the show, have some patience with us. We might be dealing with some technical difficulties for those that may have listened to the two dry run shows. You know that there were some audio level issues that we're still working the kinks out of. So we appreciate your patience, but we're so excited to be able to launch this show again here at AmericanExperiment.org and live on the MixLR app. On the show today, Andrew Langer, the president of the Institute for Liberty. He should be joining us this morning right around 6:30. Also, Representative Tom Emmer will be joining us coming up at 8 o'clock this morning as we move through all the news of the day. Brand new email address is john.justice@americanexperiment.org. And we do have a new comment line. That number is 612-584-4565. Again, that is 612-584-4565 if you want to leave a comment for the show at any point during the show. Thank you so much for the comments. We received several over the course of the weekend, and those that had a chance to listen to the dry run episodes that are available up via the podcast as well. And I know that we have a lot of people have questions on a number of different issues, especially if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the dry run shows. If you want the full story of what transpired in my departure from my previous job We told those stories over the course of those 2 episodes. So I encourage you to go and give those a listen. Again, those are available via the podcast. Those are up now on whatever podcast platforms you happen to listen to your podcasts on. So if you want to know the backstory of what happened with the previous job, also how this whole venture transpired. It was really just an incredibly wild month. And I'll just say up front, and I mentioned this at the America 250 block party, which we'll talk about here in just a moment on Saturday, celebrating, of course, America's 250th birthday. But I immediately reached out to Center of the American Experiment after I was unceremoniously told that my services were no longer needed at the previous job. And it was a really quick turnaround working with Center of the American Experiment to put this together. I hit the road with my son Kyle for a 2-week road trip, and from the moment we got back, and actually from the road, we did a lot of work as well. We've been working hard behind the scenes to make this show possible. So again, if you want to hear the entire backstory of how we ended up here, I would encourage you to go and listen to those 2 episodes, including the Freedom Friday episode, in which Catherine and Grace joined me. I need to welcome in as well producer Isaac, who was working diligently behind the scenes this morning to make sure that everything is off and running appropriately. So far, so good?
So far, so good, but had me sweating this morning, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know.
First time producing a radio show for me.
Yeah, I forget that. I was thinking about that on the drive in. I'm like, oh my gosh, Isaac's never actually done this before. You know the technical aspect of this stuff. That's your role here at American Experiment. But in terms of actually producing a show, I'm like, oh yeah, he's never done this before. Well,
I'm sure people will be quick to give their opinion on how we're doing.
Well, I'd say so far so good.
So far so good.
So far so good. We were running a replay, and I'm hoping we can do that more. Streaming online on the various platforms. And right now we are live on X. We are live on Facebook, Center of the American Experiment for both of those. We are also, of course, live on the MixLR app and at AmericanExperiment.org. We're hoping to go live on a few other locations, but we were dealing with some connection issues that haven't been worked out. But right now, AmericanExperiment.org, the MixLR app, YouTube, Facebook, and X for Center of the American Experiment. And I know that we were dealing with a couple of technical issues to kick things off. But speaking of people having questions about the show, and we do have another comment that's rolled into 612-584-4565.
You're fascinating to talk to.
I pulled that at the last minute before I left today. I hadn't grabbed yet. I'm missing a lot of what I had from the previous show in terms of the drops that we use. And I was running ahead of schedule, although clearly not ahead of schedule enough based off of how much we were scrambling as the show started this morning. But I was running ahead of schedule, and I was like, you know what? There's a couple of things that I'm definitely going to need. And
You're fascinating to talk to.
This was one of them. The other one
Buffalo.
That's right. Buffalo, Fluffalo. Let's go here. Bill Glon's got a piece at Center of the American Experiment. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has discontinued proclamations, including those for Independence Day and the 250th anniversary of America. Now, of course, as I mentioned, the Center of the American Experiment hosted an event at the state capitol to recognize the nation's 250th birthday, highlighting the importance of celebrating America's enduring government. But in order to avoid recognizing Independence Day or the 250th anniversary of America, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz discontinued the practice of issuing proclamations altogether. The official proclamations page now includes the following disclaimer. At this time, the office is no longer accepting proclamation requests. We appreciate your interest. So the final entry on the page for this was dated July 3rd, and it honors the Ethiopian Independence Day. Nothing has been posted in more than 3 weeks since then. Now, Bill Glahn did further digging into this and said the purpose of the program, as stated on the website, the governor's office issues proclamations recognizing events and activities and causes that are significant to a broad group of Minnesotans, but apparently not the 4th of July or the 250th anniversary of America. Somehow, Bill Glahn writes, 4th of July didn't make the cut. Before discontinuing the program, however, Walz managed to honor Refugee Day on June 20th, of course, Juneteenth on June 19th, Pride Month in June, Memorial Day on May 25th, I'll give him one, MLK Day, I'll give him two, January 19th, and many lesser and local events in between. Now, to be fair, Bill writes, after consulting the archives, the Walz administration does not appear to have been in the habit of honoring July 4th with a formal proclamation. One would have hoped, though, that he would have for the 250th anniversary, and that would have proven the exception of the rule. But alas, what Governor Tim Walz posted on July 4th was this: Happy 4th of July. 250 years later, let's keep pushing towards that more perfect union.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good.
You hear the disdain in that, right? I mean, it's easy to gloss over it if you don't know the background of Governor Tim Walz, if you don't know what a radical the guy is. But happy 4th of July, Minnesota, 250 years later. Can't just go and say, happy 250th birthday. No, he has to add in, let's keep pushing towards that more perfect union. Anybody else goes and makes a comment like that, and it's rather benign, but not for Governor Tim Walz. Bill Glahn's response to this was, the tepid official response could be seen from a mile away, which is why we at the Center of the American Experiment took it upon ourselves to host the closest thing Minnesota will see to an official recognition of the nation's 250th birthday. And thank you to everybody who came out to that event. We really had a great crowd, and what was interesting was, I think, a lot of us hoped that we would have a lot more people. Of course, I mean, you always want to have just a massive group. Looking online, there were celebrations that were going on all across the state. And that really warmed my heart. I mentioned at the event on Saturday and a little bit in the dry run shows that I was so surprised, inspired, and encouraged at just how much of this country was celebrating America's 250th outside of Minnesota. You'd be hard-pressed to see it in Minnesota, but across the country, everywhere. I mean, we're talking from major hotels to small rinky-dink hotels that you couldn't pay me enough to stay into. There were kiosks at different gas station rest stops along America's highways that were selling 250th merchandise that I hadn't seen anywhere before that. Last month, Bill Glahn wraps up in his piece, Gallup reported that American pride falls to a 25-year record low. And by 25-year low, Gallup actually means it's the lowest ever. The polling company only started asking this question back in 2001, according to Gallup. Currently, 70% of Republicans and 28% of independents, 14% of Democrats say they're extremely proud to be American. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit disturbed by that 70% of Republicans. That really should be more, in my opinion. And I can't help but wonder if the mentality of many people answering that poll question has been tainted by just how toxic politics currently are here in the United States. 28% of independents and 14% of Democrats say they're extremely proud to be American. None of that surprises me, and we have several examples of the ramifications, the negative ramifications of that sentiment to share on the show today. Bill Glon writes, and I'm going to echo what he says, count me among the extremely proud. You know, one thing that I had confirmed on my travels with my son was, because I say this often to the family at home, and I've said it as much doing my show, that, you know, if you disconnect from the media and you just look at your life and how you are doing, sure, there are difficulties, right? Sure, there are, you know, issues relating to just the high cost of gasoline with the continued Iran war activity going on, and we'll talk about that coming up in just a moment as well. You still have inflation. Although it's slowed, it still keeps the grocery prices high. But if you disconnect from all of the rhetoric and everything going on and just look at your life and how it is, life in America is still fantastic. We have our issues. We need to work through those issues. We need to continue to fight for what is right. But when I was on my trip, being able to finally fully disconnect for a full 2 weeks, you know, I was reminded personally of why I love this country, why I feel so blessed and grateful to have been born and raised here and raising a family here as well. I also told the crowd at the event, I said, hey, you know, it's good to get to a disconnect, but please don't, because we want you, of course, listening to the show. Speaking of which, we do have more comments that have been rolling into the comment line. 612-584-4565 is the number if you want to leave a comment at any point throughout the show.
Listening to the Freedom Friday dry run, and the float test for eggs is not a real thing. It is not accurate, so you will end up wasting a lot of eggs. So don't do the float test. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
That is good to know. Going back to the Freedom Friday show. All right. Let's go ahead and take a brief intermission. I want to play for you some audio that you might have missed from some of the more recent Center of the American Experiment podcast hosted by Catherine and Grace. Coming up, I'll give you an update. U.S. holds fire against Iran as reports emerge of stockpile concerns. I was dubious of these claims from the get-go. And even this morning, when listening to Fox News, there was some reporting refuting this whole New York Times report that apparently we're stopping our operations because of a lack of stockpile of ammunition and what we need to continue this fight. I'll give you the details. We'll talk with Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty. We'll get to more of your comments, 612-584-4565. And you can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
As of right now, the trust fund reserves are projected to be completely depleted by, I believe, the fourth quarter of 2032. Now, as the law currently stands, when that point is reached, there will be an automatic reduction in monthly payments to recipients estimated at around 20 to 24%. So, like, you know, a quarter or fifth. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a committee I can get behind, estimated that in Minnesota, more than 1 million people, that's 18% of our state's population, will see their payments cut by an average of $530
a Minneapolis spokesperson said, quote, when one says that declining market values mean homeowners will pay more, it can be misleading because it implies a direct automatic shift, which is not how the system works. Well, that response did not age well, given recent reports that the percentage of property taxes that Minneapolis homeowners are now responsible for has increased by 6.2% since 2021 and is now approaching 56%.
Right. It might not literally be like an automatic, you know, lever system shifting. And at the same time, it kind of is, because that money has to come from somewhere. And it happened exactly the way we said.
Minneapolis, for instance. Now, Minneapolis abolished the single-family zoning, so you can, in theory, you can build any type of housing anywhere. But they have a minimum lot size requirement for, say, 5,000 square feet in a lot of the parts of the city. That means that as a developer, because one, the land costs you a lot of money, you are incentivized to build a very large house because that's the only way you can make a profit.
Sure.
Which means the young family that's just starting out, they have young kid, they could do with a smaller house.
Right.
They don't even have that option for that smaller home.
Wow, that's super interesting because, yeah, it does seem like that's what we're missing is a lot of those like smaller single family. News broke last week of the continued dramatic decrease in downtown Minneapolis commercial building values. He reported to KSTP that this sector of real estate has dropped in value by 45% in just the last 5 years.
It's so easy to point at that and say, oh, well, COVID killed, economic activity, but other cities are recovering. So Minneapolis cannot use that excuse anymore.
Well, and the decline seems to be accelerating. Despite 6 years having passed since the economic downturn from COVID, like you said, city data indicates the 5 highest valued buildings downtown saw a 20% drop in value in just the past year.
Housing Affordability Institute actually estimated that just to comply, new home could cost up to $44,000 more. So just imagine you're already having issues, young people being able to afford a home right now, but by 2038, that's going to be even worse. And because of a new mandate that we have. That
in Minnesota.
In Minnesota. So this was passed in 2024. It's called the 2038 mandate. So every 3 years, we're going to have to update our International Energy Code. So every new update comes with new rules, new things to do. You have to buy more expensive materials for your home. You have to, go through all of this complex process just to get a home.
Two of the biggest, areas of concern for young people are, of course, housing for first-time home buyers and then childcare as they start to have kids.
Yeah, and you mentioned the current elections. Candidate Amy Klobuchar, one of the first things she did was release a housing affordability plan, which I thought was interesting. Clearly, people on all sides are seeing that this is an issue that people, especially young people, care about is housing, and then also childcare. We see, young people struggling to make ends meet, and childcare is one of the things that takes up the majority of their budget.
It's the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, AmericanExperiment.org, streaming live at AmericanExperiment.org. Also on the MixLR app, you can find the show on Facebook, Center of the American Experiment, and its YouTube page as well. The comment line, 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565. And if you want to drop me an email, john.justice@AmericanExperiment.org.
Hey, John, just found your show. Glad to have you back. I'll see you Monday morning. This is Kurt from Crystal. I didn't leave my name very often, but I will in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Again, 612-584-4565 if you want to leave us a comment at any point throughout the show. The U.S. has paused airstrikes against Iran, possibly due to dwindling munitions and concerns about a wider war. Now, Iran warned the conflict would expand if the U.S. continued attacks, while the U.S. Considered a return to negotiations. The conflict, nearing its 5th month, has spread beyond the Strait of Hormuz to include attacks on U.S. bases and regional shipping. So this has been the thought that's been going around and the commentary going around, the latest when it comes to Operation Epic Fury and the ongoing attempts to keep Iran from being able to wage war against us and our allies as well. I've been dubious of these claims from the start as they've been circulating. I have a hard time believing that anybody, in the administration would be willing to go and give up that type of detailed information relating to dwindling stockpiles, but 2, also that we wouldn't even have this issue altogether. Working through this story from Newsmax, U.S. operations against Iran were on hold. CNN reported, quoting, of course, an unidentified Pentagon source, even as President Donald Trump threatened a much higher level of strikes on Friday. Now, plans to escalate the campaign have been shelved, in part, they say, because of shrinking supplies. The New York Times reported this, citing 2 people briefed on the matter. And typically these things take place like a game of telephone. Who are the individuals within the administration? Who are the people that were briefed on the matter? Was it somebody just simply doing back of the napkin math? Saying, well, when you look at the data relating to how much ammunition and stockpiles of weapons the U.S. has. And then you consider how long the engagement has been going on. And when you consider the reports of just how extensive the strikes has been, one could go and extrapolate that we are running out of supplies. And this is the reason why the Trump administration is halting their efforts. See how easy that was? See how simple that was? This morning, as I'm driving in, Fox News had a report pointing to this very thing. A Pentagon Defense Department spokesperson came out directly and said this morning that don't fall for this essential fake news. I'm adding the fake news part. They didn't go and they didn't go and say it that way. I'm saying that. Don't fall for the fake news. President Donald Trump has paused attacks. I'm working off of another piece, this one from Fox News. He's giving talks some space. He's giving a little bit of room. This is according to Mike Waltz to a broadcaster on Sunday. Waltz did not provide further detail on the nature of the talks, but there has been a weekend lull in fighting between Iran and the United States. The Pentagon paused the bombing operations after 13 nights of escalating strikes, and there were no weekend reports of attacks by Iran on its neighbors. And taking it a step further, you had CENTCOM Chief Admiral Brad Cooper in this report from Newsmax recommending the halting of the bombing campaign around the Strait of Hormuz, citing the limited effectiveness after 2 weeks of strikes. What drives me nuts with all of this is just how difficult it is to get to the truth of what's happening here. The cycle's not going to change. The mainstream media is going to continue to do what the mainstream media does. They've been putting out what I believe is this false narrative relating to why we have halted these operations. They want to make the Trump administration look as inept as possible. They want to make this effort to undermine Iran's ability to wage war. They want to make this look futile. It is wholly anti-American in their efforts. And as I'm going about my prep this morning, and I'm attempting to go and get to the heart, what is really taking place, it takes like 3 or 4 articles until you finally land on the fact that the recommendation, limited effectiveness after weeks of airstrikes, which I'll talk about here in just a moment, influenced President Trump's decision to pause these strikes on Iran. Military operations have slowed. Diplomatic efforts continue to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and establish a multinational coalition for protecting commercial shipping. Now, Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of the U.S. Central Command, advised Pentagon leaders, the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the White House last week, that 2 weeks of sustained airstrikes had weakened Iran's ability to threaten the commercial shipping through these strategic waterways, citing multiple sources familiar with the discussions. Now, his assessment, combined with advice from other senior military officials, influenced Trump's decision Friday to suspend the attacks targeting Iranian positions along Iran's southern coast around the Strait of Hormuz. The move marked the first time that we had a pause in nearly 2 weeks, and Trump's decision following a meeting Friday with senior security advisors, military officials, who presented updated operational plans for the day's strikes. Axios reported when military operations slowed, diplomatic efforts continue. It remains unclear, the Newsmax article goes on to say, whether any negotiated agreement between Tehran would satisfy the Trump administration. And if negotiations fail or Washington rejects the proposed terms, the fighting could resume. Listen, beyond whatever the ramifications will be of these operations against Iran, one thing that nobody is talking about is the valuable lessons that are being learned right now regarding modern warfare. There's absolutely no denying that at all. And it really goes to show in the difficulty, and it has been difficult. I think most of us wanted this to be over much quicker. Most of us, and I think the administration was hoping, that in the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, that we would be able to undermine Iran enough, weaken the regime enough so the people of Iran could rise up and take back their country. And that didn't happen, unfortunately. Now, I'm sure the administration was absolutely ready for that fact and had plans and have been executing those plans in hopes that eventually the people of Iran will have the ability to do that, or Iran will finally wise up, come to the table, agree to the terms of the United States, and we can, for once and for all, keep them from creating and obtaining a nuclear weapon. But it also goes to show, and this is not me giving a pass to any previous administrations, but it also goes to show the previous administration's leadership, their reluctancy to take on Iran. This is the reason why, because it was going to be a difficult task, but one that absolutely needed to be done. I don't know about you. For me personally, I'm okay paying a little more in gasoline right now. I have been from the beginning, and I continue to be fine with that today. The same thing goes when it comes to grocery prices, if indeed the war with Iran has been affecting that. If it means that we can have success in keeping Iran from being able to obtain a nuclear weapon and threaten us and our allies in the future. And the larger takeaway from this whole thing, once again, is the fact that, just continue to ignore the mainstream media when they relate or when they talk about things with unnamed, unsourced individuals trying to undermine the administration's efforts. It's interesting. I go back really quick to the story about Governor Jim Walz and his ending the proclamations right before the 4th of July, making that sort of passing, we could do better, America, in 250 years comment. Listen, Walz is a radical. He's on his way out. There's no denying that. I'm glad that he's leaving. But make no mistake, is Amy Klobuchar going to be, if she were to be governor, would she be brave enough? Would she be brave enough to go and say, happy 4th of July, happy birthday, America 250? Or would she be just as cowardly as Walz is? Now, we know why Governor Jim Walz doesn't want to go and celebrate America's 250, because he doesn't genuinely love this country, because we know what a radical he is. But make no mistake, Amy Klobuchar, were she to become governor, would not be any better. The comment line is 612-584-4565. If you want to drop me an email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. And with that, I am very pleased to welcome to the show and up and awake, Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty. Good morning, sir. It is fantastic to talk to you and to see you this morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, this is what it looks like in my radio studio, because I don't have the fancy new wavy Depeche Mode album cover backdrop that John has.
They gave me, for those that are watching the video stream, we were debating on the backgrounds that we wanted, right? And we had these nice wooden panels that looked all rustic and all that. And then I don't know who first suggested it, but we saw these textured panels, and I was like, that's it. That's the one. That's the one. That's the one that I want right there. So yeah. No, I'm really excited.
Too many bowling alleys that John went to in Southern California in the 1970s.
I think my wife secretly tossed. Speaking of bowling, I had a smattering of bowling shirts when I was growing up. Andrew Langer. I'm pretty sure that Melinda tossed all of those once we got married, because suddenly all my bowling shirts suddenly disappeared.
Oh, and that's too bad, because literally, this is not me doing shtick. Those are back in vogue. So I totally.
Now you're gonna make me sad.
Sorry. Yeah. So everybody, if you're watching the stream, this is puffy, barely awake me. This is when they say people have a face for radio. That is my picture is in there.
So this is how you look at every single time that we've done our hits together on the show. Is that what we can assume? And again, there's only a portion of the audience that's actually watching the video. We are, of course, live at AmericanExperiment.org and on the MixLR app as we talk with Andrew Langer.
Normally, I wouldn't be wearing a baseball cap. I'm wearing that because my hair's a mess. Yeah, listen. First of all, John, congratulations on this. This is really exciting. So thrilled that the Center for the American Experiment has brought you on board to do this. It is really just such a wonderful idea, and I am, of course, thrilled to be a part of it on the first sort of real show. So.
You are the first guest on the official launch of the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. And you know, one of the wonderful things now, Andrew Langer, is that we're no longer under time constraints.
Yes.
It's so liberating.
Listen, yes, it's gonna completely mess you up if you start doing any kind of fill-in radio work. Having to work off the clock is gonna be a problem. But yes, so we can gab about all kinds of stuff, man. So lots been going on, obviously.
Well, let's start here, just really quick, since we're on it. You and I talked a lot outside of the show about the state of radio. I know that you've had your own issues regarding regarding radio. If I won't get into the specifics of that, and I'll leave it right. I'll leave it right there. And as I've mentioned several times, I hold no animosity to the previous employer whatsoever. But times are absolutely changing, and it really feels like, and it's an easy thing for me to say, having now officially left to terrestrial radio and now venturing into streaming, and we feel like we're sort of paving the way, because I firmly believe that live show streaming is going to be the next phase of talk content, along with how podcasts have grown. But I feel like radio is finally sort of catching up to what we saw relating to the demise of over-the-air TV.
Right.
It's still there. People still tap into it, but not nearly as much as before. And I feel like what we're seeing right now, especially with what happened with my previous employer, we're beginning to see the potential beginning of the end of terrestrial radio as we know it. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that, Andrew.
Well, isn't it interesting, John? Because the National Association of Broadcasters did a fly-in a couple of weeks ago into D.C. To have folks talk about. There's this debate back and forth whether or not there should be a mandate that all cars have an AM radio in them, or have even, I think, either AM or FM, though the focus tends to be on AM radio these days, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is, there can be some, with these newfangled cars, John, these newfangled, more electronic cars, there's a lot of interference that gets into the AM signal. When I go back and forth about this, I don't like mandates. I don't like having these things mandated. I also, given the consolidation in radio and the role that consolidators have been playing in driving National Association of Broadcasters policy, I go back and forth as to whether or not I want to enable this, right? I mean, this is the situation. You and I know, right? I mean, yes, obviously we are transitioning from broadcasting to narrowcasting, which I don't think is a really great thing, because it helps to sort of get at the issue of, continue the issue of stovepiping. With getting people segregated in their own little communities.
Right.
That being said, right there, the wonderful thing about the work that you do, that I've done on and off in the past. There's a reason why people tune in. And it's the same reason why people tune into podcasts and other kinds of streaming services, because they want that connection, right? It's theater of the mind. It's a direct, obviously you and I are doing video right now, but when folks are listening to an audio stream, it's a direct line into their cerebral cortex, right? And they can, they build that connection that way. So, it's ironic that the consolidators out there have moved towards getting rid of local programming, when you and I both know that it's local programming that allows these businesses to thrive and survive. That connection. Listen, I know you did on the old show, you did your talkbacks. Actually, let me digress for 1 second, John.
And so I can still do those, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Good.
As a matter of fact, but before you continue, because it's right along what we're talking about, Let me go to the let's go to the comment line, 612-584-4565, if you want to leave a comment.
Good morning, John. Rick in Virginia. I knew you would bounce. Congratulations on your new show on a new network. I think that's great, and I'm excited for you. I think iHeart made a critical mistake. You'll have to live with it. best of luck in all your future endeavors. And yeah, I'm looking forward and excited for you. Have a great day.
And before you continue, Andrew, let me just say that again, no animosity towards the previous employer, and on top of that, I'm glad it all happened. I told the crowd at the America 250 event at the Capitol on Saturday that if I had been presented with this opportunity while still in the other format, I would have left. I would have left that to do this, because I do feel like this is the future. And to continue with your comments as we talk with Andrew Langer.
What I was going to say is, so I'm watching, I'm doom scrolling on YouTube, and something pops up, and it's from, weirdly enough, I don't know why this popped in, but it was a segment on from public television on, and it's very recent, on this line, John, when radio stations used to take phone calls from anyone. And it was from some local, NPR affiliate. I want to say in the Midwest. And I'm thinking, I still take calls from anyone. I've always taken calls from anyone. Listen, if I could do what those of you may remember a syndicated radio host named Don Geronimo, the old Don and Mike show. Don Geronimo used to take unscreened phone calls on the air, which is incredibly dangerous. But I love it. I think it's for you. Just got to make sure you got your finger on the dump button. But yeah, so this connection is vital, and that's gonna. I think you're right. I think it's gonna play off in spades in terms of this new format for the show and the connection you're gonna have with your audience.
Let's go back to the comment line as we talk with the president of the Institute for Liberty, Andrew Langer. We're going to find out a little bit about what he's been involved in, including this podcast series that I'm interested in hearing about. But let's go here back to the comment line on the John Justice Show.
Hey, Don. Welcome back. This is Deb from Edina. Just to your America 250 message, we went out for breakfast on July 4th to Perkins. And Perkins usually does a nice job of having some seasonal decor and whatnot. Not a stitch of July 4th, Americana, nothing of great any changes on the menu to that regard. As we were leaving, one of the hostesses was cleaning the windows, and I go, I'm really surprised that you're not decorated for the holiday. And she goes, oh no, our policy has changed. You can only decorate now for Christmas. Oh, here you go. Have a great show. Bye.
Andrew, I had mentioned I took this 2-week trip with my son Kyle across the country. We went to from here to Arizona, California, and back. And once we got on the road, and I've mentioned this several times, and I'll bring it up to you because we haven't talked about it. But I was stunned at the amount of America 250 promotional items across the country. They were, on hotels, big and small, inside of convenience stores on the road. There were kiosks where you could buy these items. I haven't seen any of this here in
John,
Minnesota.
You're telling me that in the People's Republic of Minnesota, you haven't seen it? Tim Walz's Minnesota, you haven't seen any of this?
The guy that ended proclamations so he didn't have to celebrate America's 250. Yes, right? I shouldn't be shocked.
Only if it was all made in China. If it was made in China and Tim Walz met the people making it, then it would have been all good. It gets me to that and you've done a fair amount of driving cross country, which is great. And I recommend that to anybody. There was a professor at George Mason University who did an essay a couple of years ago about, if you really want to get to know people, you drive 50 miles in any direction and have a conversation with a stranger. And I obviously, not a weird conversation with a stranger, but I believe in that. My parents, every other summer, we used to drive across country. I was very fortunate, to have two academics as parents. And so, they could take the 6 weeks off in the summertime and drive. And yeah, the conversations we would have, the people we would meet, the places we would see. I got to tell you, I was in Monterey, California. For
beautiful
a week
there.
in June. It was great. It was a wonderful trip. But then I took a trip south, and I didn't do the Pacific Coast Highway like a lot of people would do. I went a little bit further inland. And I wound up first of all, I wound up having an amazing tri-tip sandwich in Paso Robles, California. And folks, if you haven't had a tri-tip sandwich, it's not quite a steak sandwich. It's not quite brisket, but it's like a smoked roast beef kind of a thing, and it was unbelievable. But I wound up taking this completely unscheduled jaunt across the wilderness. Literally, I was driving next to a wilderness area in the Chumash Wilderness, and it was so soul affirming, just to sort of get out there and see it all. And it was like being in the Southwest, being in Arizona or New Mexico, some of the roads that I was on. And it was exactly what I had needed, in the wake of my dad passing back in May. But you gotta get out there, and sometimes it's like, Chevy Chase's Vacation. Sometimes it's about the kitsch. Sometimes it's about finding the Buc-ee's. Other times it's just about finding some place that's off the beaten path. Having a tri-tip sandwich cooked on a smoker in the back of a liquor store is the way you want to go.
Well, as I've said, it was a blessing to be able to take this time off. I had secured everything here, even though we had a lot of planning to do. I'd secured everything here before we hit the road, which was great for me. It was great for Melinda because I was really worried about leaving and having my whole job situation up in the air. And it really was, God really granted me, the ability to disconnect, to recharge, to remember, what life in this country is like without that dark cloud of modern day politics hanging overhead, which had me so excited to get things started today. Now, with that fact, let's talk about it. I know you have a new 2-part podcast series that's kicking up, and this is really in the wheelhouse of something that we've been doing on the show and that we'll continue to do on the show, talking about the advancements in artificial intelligence with David Gartenstein-Ross. But talk a little bit, Andrew Langer, about this podcast series.
Yeah, so, it's funny. About a couple of months ago, I had lunch with Wayne Cruz from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Wayne does a lot of regulatory work, and obviously is a longtime colleague of mine. And he says to me, Andrew, it's really funny. We're having all these conversations about AI, and they normally go into like 3 camps, right? There's the camp that believes in permissionless innovation, which is generally the pro-tech side of things. Our good friend Adam Thier at the R Street Institute, and most of our libertarian colleagues fall into that, permissionless innovation on the side of AI. Then you've got some folks who are concerned about AI stealing all of our jobs. And then you've got a certain group of people who believes that AI is going to turn all of our kids into gay perverts. And so they want to tamp down on that. And listen, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories on where the money for this is coming from, but that's where the concerns are. And Wayne says, I got another concern, which is, the use by government of AI as an enforcement tool. And I was like, isn't that really interesting, Wayne? Because it was like a year ago, I was at an event at George Washington University talking about AI and regulation, because I want to use AI as a compliance assistance tool, right? It should be easy, for you to plug in a few key pieces of information about your business, and the government should be able to tell you what your regulatory obligations are. But the keynote address at this event was from an enforcement attorney with the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. And she was positively salivating at the idea of using AI to go after people. And in an environment in which, we have this massive breadth of regulatory law, there's a guy named Harvey Silverglade who wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day, in which, he posits that the average American unknowingly commits 3 felonies a day, because we just don't know. Government's ability to use AI to go after people, that's a really scary thing, especially when we talk about lawfare and the weaponization of law against political opponents. And so I'm having this conversation with Wayne, and then the next day I'm at a barbecue, some law professors at William and Mary, and I meet a woman, and she is a law professor. She's a former Obama administration DOJ Civil Rights Division official. And we're chatting about stuff, and she says, what I'm really concerned about is the use by government, government using AI to go after people. and she's written a book about it. So I've done this. I interview her. That interview drops today on the Washington Signal's Lunch Hour podcast. Next week is Wayne Cruz. And, it's like I come down to this, right? If you're someone who, like me, is concerned about red light cameras, speed cameras generally, speed cameras more than red light cameras. Here's the thing, right? Everybody, maybe not everybody. John, I don't know about you, but at least in my perception, 90% of Americans speed, at some point in time. And, part of it is we know that, when you compare the number of cars that are on the highway versus the number of police officers running speed traps, your chances of getting pulled over for a modicum of speeding, right? We're not talking about someone who is driving recklessly, but let's say you're going 5-10 miles over the speed limit at any given point in time. Your chances of getting a ticket are relatively slim. Once you put out speed cameras, right, all of a sudden you automate the law enforcement and everybody can get dinged. And if you have speed cameras everywhere like they do in Washington, D.C., someone can get dinged multiple times. Not speaking from my own personal experience, maybe. And so that's what we're talking about here. When you have an environment in which the deck is already stacked against someone who is facing an administrative action by an agency like the EPA or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or what have you, right, where these agencies are winning between 95 and 100% of the time in administrative proceedings. We're not even talking about, criminal actions, but administrative actions. It becomes now we're automating regulatory enforcement, and it just becomes a huge cash cow for the government. And anyway, especially if we're not going to go after and reduce the amount of regulations that are out there. So that's this. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've certainly, it's not the first time that we've had concerns of emerging technology. Let me ask you this quick question, then I'll kind of continue with my train of thought. So are you putting artificial intelligence in a different category than other times, looking back at history when we've had a change in the way that we can receive information, disseminate information, and the concerns that came along with that? Do you think artificial intelligence is reaching another level and is of greater concern than, let's just say, for the sake of argument, the rise of the internet? Because there were certainly concerns when the internet came about. Can the regulatory aspect keep up with the advancements of artificial intelligence as well as it's implemented?
Well, that's the problem. No, I really put this in the category of the same concerns that people raise about things like speed cameras, right? And this is not so much about the surveillance state and flock cameras, though I think that certainly gets into all of this. I'm not someone who is reflexively opposed, but what I'm concerned about, and again, this is not opposition, this is deep and abiding concern. Depending on which definition you're using of AI, right? Are we just looking at large language models? Are we looking at the ability to just crunch massive amounts of data? My concerns are my concerns remain the same, that the real concern is the level of power that is concentrated within the hands of the federal government or any government agency. That's where the concern lies. And when you sort of benignly neglect the expansion of that power, you are setting up the conditions for when it does become easier for government to flex that muscle, right? When essentially, like, we're giving, now maybe this is going to be not so technology neutral, but when you're essentially giving the government steroids in their ability to flex that regulatory authority muscle, then we've got to have a conversation about both the what they're flexing their muscle on, but then also the use of steroids, right? I mean, listen, it gets back to, and this is really what Margaret Hu and I talk about today. It gets back to first principles. There's a reason why we have a Bill of Rights that constrains government power, right? There's a reason why we have a Fifth Amendment specifically that talks about issues of, I do differentiate, I know a lot of conservatives don't, between substantive and procedural due process, but there's a reason why we have safeguards safeguarding the due process rights of individuals. So it's not about the technology so much as the ability of technology, right? Some of this gets into the same concerns that folks raised about the militarization of law enforcement. And we can go, back and forth on that. And I don't want to talk about the specter of black helicopters, but back in the 1990s. So now we're going back 30 years when the Bureau of Land Management was patrolling in Humvees and military style helicopters patrolling the public lands. Go ahead, man.
Do you think it would be appropriate to limit the use of artificial intelligence in things that you mentioned at the onset? Your concern about how this could be used for further surveillance or law enforcement efforts. Do you think we should be looking and saying, you know what, we need to put a moratorium on? because we really haven't. We've seen this sort of infect all of our technology so far. Should we start limiting that?
Listen, I think before the president starts talking about either hijacking preemption and kicking the regulation of AI for the public up to the federal government, right? Long before we do that, have that conversation, we should be having the conversation about what the feds are doing with it. And I say this by way of saying, just 2 weeks ago, the SEC had a rulemaking out there. And in a second, I want to sort of explain what it is that I do, because I think it's good to sort of reset with the audience on this. The SEC had a rulemaking in which they are talking about creating a massive database of every stock trader and every stock trade. And the only reason why an agency wants this is because they want to be able to start automating how they go about reviewing, behavior for hinky behavior that's out there. And certainly we need a conversation about who gets to determine, and what level, if somebody hits a pattern that some AI has developed. We need to have that conversation about this, right? When you start talking about the government buying, whether or not it's databases of text messages or databases of DNA sampling, it all of a sudden, there's all of this micro targeting that's already out there can really be weaponized, and so we need to have that. By the way, so folks, so you understand sort of where things are with me. So I'm not doing regulatory work for CPAC anymore. There may be a new project coming up on that. We are reinvigorating the Institute for Liberty. But a lot of my job still is to look at what these agencies are doing, what the proposals that they're putting out on a daily basis, analyzing them and filing comments on them. It's, there's a website called regulations.gov. They're constantly updating it with the comments, the proposals that you can file comments on. Like today, I'm going to be reviewing some stuff. The EPA is still looking at how they're going to change the permitting process under the National Environmental Policy Act, stuff like that, and filing comments in them to talk about these agencies.
Talking with Andrew Langer, again, president of the Institute for Liberty. I want to go to a comment here and then switch over before we let you go this morning. Something else I want to discuss with you. But first, let's go back to 612-584-4565. That's the number where you can leave us a comment, just like the previous way you could do that here on the John Justice Show.
Hey, John, this is Chuck from Green Isle. It sure was great to ride the rising sun with you this morning. That was a great show.
Andrew, a little bit later on next hour, I'm going to be talking about how there's a DNC meltdown taking place. Flat broke. The Democrat National Committee is reportedly $2 million in debt as we see this rise of Democrat socialists. And they certainly be getting a lot of attention in mainstream media. I have several clips that I'll be sharing with the listeners. That said, though, I'm working on a piece from The Hill that I know you wanted to comment on. J.D. Vance, potential successor to Trump, criticized for his embrace of progressive economic ideas, particularly his support for government-controlled economic planning over free market principles. The author argues that this shift away from Milton Friedman's laissez-faire economics, which historically benefited the GOP, is a strategic mistake that could weaken the party's appeal against its socialist candidates. So I missed this in the middle of doing all my prep. Once again, you kind of brought it to my attention. Maybe it's a good thing it hasn't been getting a lot of attention. But what happened here, Andrew
Well, no,
Langer?
I mean, what's going on is, J.D. Vance made it really clear that he's not a big fan of Milton Friedman, and that's been an interesting thing. But let's sort of talk historically and political trends, right? It's one of those things where you have to be who you are, right, in terms of politics. And when you try to imitate the other side, only just do a little bit less of it, it sort of never works, right? So, Democrats running as Republican light has not been a good strategy for them in a while. Obviously, now we see the rise of socialist. I never thought that I would see a Republican running as socialist light. Not that J.D. Vance is a socialist. I want to be really clear about this, and really, really careful about it.
You're going to tick people off this morning.
On the other hand, as he, tends to show his disdain for Milton Friedman, someone a lot of us hold dear. We still talk about Milton Friedman as one of the great giants of free market limited government thought. That's a problem. But it's really kind of interesting, John, as we are looking past the Trump 2.0 to what happens next and how it is changing. It's been really interesting, sort of watching some of our colleagues, shall we say, be a little bit flexible when it comes to their policy stances based upon what the White House has been saying. And some of this has to do with the issue of free trade. And you and I have talked about trade, and we've talked about tariffs and the good and the bad and the ugly. But some of the groups that had been sort of reflexively cheerleading for the administration on this are starting to soften their stances, shall they say, and are coming back to, maybe some of the price control policies that are being advocated aren't such good things. That's been really interesting in the last few weeks. I mean, I'll give you a really prime example of this. There's a lot of debate right now over the Rail Safety Act. Now, this is not tariffs. This is not a trade issue, but this is a regulatory issue. This is government mandates. And essentially, our good friend Grover Norquist would posit that the Rail Safety Act is nothing really more than a giveaway to big labor. Essentially, it's about employment mandates within the railway industry, making sure you have X number of people on trains at a particular time. None of which, by the way, would have prevented the East Palestine accident in Ohio, which is nominally what's given J.D. Vance the rise to support this. And so, the groups that are out there sort of pushing back are raising some real concerns over what, say, a J.D. Vance presidency might look like when it comes to things like big government approaches to regulation and economic regulation. So glad we're having this conversation now. I don't think I think the deck continues to be stacked against Republicans going into November for a lot of reasons. But in terms of a reset and a retrenchment going into 2028, this is a good conversation to be having now because it really sets up the contrast between J.D. Vance and others.
Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty. Two things. When can people check out your AI-related two-part podcast, and what else have you been working on that those that are tuned in currently should go and take a look at and listen to?
Listen, if you're not following me on X, you need to be at Andrew_Langer on X. Also, the Lunch Hour podcast at the Lunch Hour Pod. That episode, Margaret Who's episode, will be dropping later on this morning. If not, probably in the next hour, but if not in the next 2 hours. So check that out. But yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to be relaunching the Institute for Liberty page, and I got a new project I'm working on, John, that's going to sort of cover the regulatory stuff. So we'll make that announcement here when it happens.
Well, Andrew Langer, your involvement in my talk host career continues. I'm so appreciative, and the fact that you're the first guest on this on this latest iteration of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Great to talk with you. I hope we can do it again next week. And thank you for the time this morning, my friend.
Yeah, next week, man. I'm going to the Western Conservative Summit in Denver on Friday. So we're talking about rail issues, talking about the Norfolk Southern Union Pacific merger. So I'll get you all up to speed on that when I get back.
Sounds great, buddy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Break a leg, man.
The comment line is 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565. And if you want to email me, the brand new email address is john.justice@americanexperiment.org.
Hey, John, you really need to get outside of the metro. You get up to Brainerd, Cross Lake, Alexandria. You get outside of the metro, you're going to see that America 250, the patriotic 4th of July. It was fantastic. Just need to get outside the blue areas. Have a great day. Good to have you back.
But I was told that that's all nothing but
and all the creatures, from the bats to the bugs, covered old fluff with kisses and hugs.
All right, coming up, Republican lawmakers blaming Canada for the wildfire smoke as the temperatures today are going to be just gross again. Isaac, I'm over it. I'm over how stupid hot it's been.
I don't have AC in my car right now.
What?
Yeah, it's miserable.
I bet you are super happy now that you're coming in early to
I woke
work.
up this morning, it's 85 degrees outside.
I thought the same.
What is going on?
Thing. Well, one of the days that I came in, I think it was Thursday that I came in early to do one of the dry run shows. And I got out and I was like, oh, this is pleasant. I almost could have worn a light jacket. So I thought today, I was like, you know what? Maybe I can wear a light jacket today. And same thing, I looked at the temperature. I'm like, it's 80 now.
Nope. Just walked into work at 5:30 sweating.
The Star Tribune is pushing back, though. They say experts say many factors lead to smoky skies, including climate change. All right, we'll get into this nonsense coming up. I do want to share my thoughts as well. Playground slur case. It takes a dark turn for free speech. I'll give you my thoughts on the 37-year-old Shiloh Marie Hendricks captured on video using a racial slur and the results of that trial. Also, Representative Tom Emmer will be joining us coming up just after 8 o'clock. I want to go ahead and do a couple of things here briefly. First off, I have a clip from Representative Tom Emmer. He was recently on the Alpha News podcast with Liz Collin. And then, if you're not following me on social media, I'm still continuing to put up a commentary on TikTok, other social media platforms as well. It was recently announced. Well, there's rumors. Let's just say there's rumors. There are people in California that are saying that Kamala Harris is planning on running again in 2028 for the presidency. So that I say yes, make that happen. So I want to share with you some of the audio from some of my social media clips, and then we'll get into how it's really climate change, guys, that we have such smoky skies, and the playground slur case. Again, if you want to leave a comment, 612-584-4565, or drop us an email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Here's a bit of Representative Tom Emmer talking with Liz Collin.
It was about a decade ago you created the Congressional Somali Caucus with then Congressman Keith Ellison. Since then, the Somali population has grown considerably in Minnesota, and not, of course, without controversy. I know hindsight always 2020 here. I don't think anyone could have predicted that just the mind-boggling amount of fraud we've seen since then. But I'm curious, looking back, would you take a different approach at all? Is there anything that we should have done differently?
So you would literally have to, for me, go back to 2009 when I was in the state house. I actually offered an amendment to outlaw Sharia law. Sharia has no place in this country. When I got to Congress, Keith Ellison, he's a slippery little devil. It became very clear to me that Keith Ellison was not being sincere about what he was talking about. He was bringing this terrorist organization CARE in. They have no interest in assimilating and becoming Americans. As soon as that happened, you can look at the record. We actually went back to the track that we were originally on. And by the way, it's the one that I was attacked on just a couple of weeks ago, talking to a faith and freedom group out here. You come to America to be an American. You come here, we're going to celebrate your culture. German, Irish, Italian, Somali. We'll celebrate your culture and we'll allow you to celebrate your culture. But we are not creating a new Somalia. This is the United States of America. You come here to be an American. And you know what? I stand by what I said. If You do not want to be an American. You do not want to assimilate and become an American and be proud of this great country. Then get the hell out of here. Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here.
You know what's even more distressing than the thought of Governor Tim Walz being the vice president of the United States of America? It's the fact that Kamala Harris could have been the president of the United States of America. This was on the Don Lemon show this week. Watch.
I really, truly believe this. We each have light inside of us. And we need to know that that is what inspires our hope as much as anything external to ourselves. And when we feel that and not allow an election or an individual to dampen that light, and instead let that light kind of carry us in particular through moments of darkness, that we not only act on that hope, but we inspire that hope in each other. And in particular at this moment, it is so important that we not only have hope, but that we understand that that should be a verb.
You know what the worst part about that clip is? It's not the word salad that she spewed on the Don Lemon show. It's the fact that Don Lemon took her seriously. We would have fewer politicians, and especially those on the left, if they weren't just given a free pass every time they do an interview and they say something completely nonsensical. But Don Lemon just nods along. Yeah, so deep. And he's not a dumb person. He understands that there was no substance to what Kamala Harris was talking about. I mean, she might as well have been referring to the mythology of the Force in Star Wars, the dark side and the light side. No, he knows that was a bunch of gobbledygook, but he's not going to dare go and call her out on it or make a comment negatively after that interview's done because of the liberal agenda. They have so little to run on. I see these headlines and I have to look at them twice because even though I shouldn't be shocked, I'm still just going, oh my gosh, it's never ending. The Small Business Administration announced today, Friday, January 2nd, that they are halting payments to some 7,000 recipients of taxpayer money going back to the pandemic because they believe that it's fraudulent, to the tune of $400 million. Now, I had to do a double check because I'm like, wait a second. This isn't autism. This isn't daycare centers. This isn't transportation. This isn't housing stabilization services. This isn't feeding our future. This is pandemic era PPE funding that people were still receiving to the tune of almost $500 million. Right now, any single program here in Minnesota that is receiving Medicaid dollars, taxpayer dollars coming from the federal government to go to social services, every single program needs to have their payments stopped right now. I get it. This is going to be and could be devastating for those individuals that need those services, but we're beyond the point of messing around at this point in time. Every single one of these programs should have the payments stopped until they are fully investigated. We need hundreds of individuals on the ground here in Minnesota to determine exactly which programs aren't fraudulent and to begin charging the individuals who are responsible for perpetuating this fraud. Instead, what do we get? We get Democrats holding press conferences with individuals who are a part of the community, attempting to go and discredit the fraud that's going on, even though it's right there in the open, blatant, in all of its misspellings for everybody to see. Listen, when I went on vacation, I never anticipated that I would be coming back after 2 weeks to the level of news that we have to share about just how broken the state of Minnesota is under Governor Tim Walz and Democrat leadership. I hope you'll...
Hey, John, great to have you back. A couple things that you're talking about this morning. Yeah, Tim Walz is right. We need to make a change. We need to get rid of these far left liberals. We need to eliminate these Democrats from the government in Minnesota so we can get this state back on track.
Thank you for the comment, Richard. And it's the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. If you want to leave a comment, 612-584-4565. Also, you can email john.justice@AmericanExperiment.org. And that phone number, once again, 612-584-4565. Right now, you can enjoy the show streaming at AmericanExperiment.org on the MixLR app, MixLR app, if you haven't downloaded that already. For ease of listening, go and download the app. We're also on the American Experiment X page, Facebook as well, and on the American Experiment YouTube pages and my YouTube page if you want to go and watch the show. Before we dive into this, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on the Gone Green update regarding what's been going on with the Canadian wildfires and those Republicans frustrated that Canada is not doing enough to mitigate what's become a yearly occurrence here in Minnesota. I'm just thankful that it didn't continue to be as bad as it had been over the course of those few days. But certainly with the extreme heat that we're dealing with right now, the Canadian wildfire smoke is and has been exacerbating the problem. Before we do that, though, and this relates to what Richard had mentioned a moment ago, what I was talking about in the montage on my social media commentary, and that is just how on the wrong track Minnesota is. Now, let me couple something with this. I was recently watching, I own the Blu-ray, not the greatest movie, although I enjoy it every time I watch it, but I wouldn't say it's a 10 out of 10. But the film Tomorrowland, if you've seen it. Isaac, have you seen Tomorrowland?
No, I have not.
Okay. Sorry, I just kind of threw that at him. I was curious. Do you just as a side note, and be careful how you answer this question, Producer Isaac. Do you watch a lot of movies?
I try to.
Okay.
I'm a bandwagon movie guy. If it gets a lot of hype, I'll watch it.
All right.
Saw The Odyssey last night.
Oh, you did?
Excellent.
Really?
Loved it.
You're going to get a lot of comments in the talkback.
I know I am.
612-584-4565. Okay, hold on. Let me get back to that. Because I need to, I know, okay, so I'm going to see it, much to the frustration of other members of my household who do not want me to go see it because of the various woke items that Christopher Nolan had injected into it. We can get into a further discussion, but let me ask you two things really quick because I do want to get to this wrong track thing. First off, were you aware of the controversies before going and seeing The Odyssey?
I was.
Okay. So you went in, I'm assuming, going, I'm anticipating. Or were you? Were you saying, I'm anticipating to see A, B, C, and D?
Yes. I expected a couple woke parts, I expected to be like, whatever. A couple eye rolls.
And?
Not as bad as I thought it'd be.
Okay.
I set the bar pretty low.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, my wife, who is your biggest fan, by the way, perhaps you've just convinced her to go see it with me because she was one of the ones that wasn't going to go see it.
I think it's a good movie. I think it's really well done.
All right. Melinda, did you hear that? Isaac said he liked it.
Great story.
Kyle was going to go see it with me. I thought Logan was going to throttle me when I told him I was going to go. I was going to go see it. Anyway, let me get back to something. So I was talking about the movie Tomorrowland. And there's an interesting global warming. They kind of breeze past it. I won't get into the plot for those that haven't seen it, but it is an enjoyable movie. I own it on Blu-ray. At the beginning of the film, they're talking about pending disaster relating to global warming. The protagonist in the movie is in class, and the teacher at the head of the class is, laying out these doomsday scenarios of what's going to happen to the United States if we don't go and change our horrible ways. And she keeps asking the question, how do we fix it? That's the whole driving theme of the film. Is this we're dealing with all of these problems, but how do we fix it? Right. And I thought it was really interesting on this rewatch that I did how it relates to what we're dealing with here in Minnesota and what I've been talking about regarding disconnecting from the news and being on my trip, that if you are not engaged in following politics extensively, you may be in a position where you don't even realize what's going on and you're living a nice, fulfilling life because of everything America, has to offer. I say that because In the month that I've been off the air from the previous show, and it's something that honestly has been weighing on me for a long, long time, we talk about so much negativity, but there needs to be more discussion about how do we fix it. Now, we do discuss it, but I don't think we're as specific regarding this. Of course, it means electing individuals that can go and bring about the necessary change to get us back on the right track. That's the most important thing that we can do from now until November, right? Be wise in your choices in the primary of who you're going to go and vote for, and then make sure that you get out to vote in November and you get as many people as possible that you know out to vote in November. When you look at the data relating to the number of individuals who go and vote, if you can just increase the percentage a little bit on the GOP side, we can win elections and get things turned around. So while we look at the doom and gloom, we talk about the ridiculousness of Governor Dim Walz and his taxpayer-funded trans dolls with removable genitalia that we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. All of these things are correctable. All of these things can be changed for the better, and we can get the state back on track, because right now we are on the wrong track. Minnesotans feel, and they know, that the state is not doing well. Kids in Mississippi can read better than kids in Minnesota. These are all data points that are based on facts. If you go to AmericanExperiment.org, you can see this for yourself. Minnesota is now below average, a below average state economically. 55% of Minnesota students can't do math at a grade level. Minnesota taxes small businesses more than any other state. As a preview, I have a Lamy Klobuchar story a little bit later on. She actually was talking about her campaign running for a governor and says that if elected, she'll lower healthcare costs and fight fraud. Well, what is she going to do regarding Minnesota taxing small businesses more than any other state? Is she going to go and address that? Minnesota's government let fraudsters steal over $9 billion. And let me just say that, you know what, Amy Klobuchar can go and propose whatever she wants to propose to fight fraud. But we had plenty of members of the GOP in the legislature in the past session that wanted to do that as well, that were putting forward ideas and plans and proposals, and they were all shot down. So I hope that the media, those that have access to Lamy Klobuchar, I hope that they go and they ask her about these issues. I hope they go and they ask her, well, what are your thoughts on the fact that you had the GOP and numerous circumstances wherein the GOP went and offered up solutions and the DFL shot them down time and time again? So just to reiterate, Minnesota is facing challenges. Below average education in the economy, business taxation. The state's per capita GDP has declined, and it has the highest effective corporate income tax rate for small businesses. Additionally, a significant portion of Medicaid funds may have been lost to fraud. Now, Amy Klobuchar knows this, which is why she is putting forward the proposals that she is putting forward. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and get to this story now. Let me just, since I'm here. I was doing this as a bit of a preview, but we're in the thick of it, so let's just go here. And again, all of this information is available up at AmericanExperiment.org, where you can also listen to this very show. So from Fox 9, Lamy Klobuchar plans to, my words, not Fox 9's, I just want to say that. She plans to modernize hospitals, strengthen rural health systems, and ensure stable funding for emergency medical services. She's emphasizing her experience and commitment to recovering stolen taxpayer dollars. That's right, everybody. We can't get a grip on this fraud unless we have Lamy Klobuchar running the state. At least that's what she would have you believe. Here's a bit of the story from Fox 9 here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Tim was also in Congress, but I have had that statewide experience, and I'm coming in with that. I know where the money's buried.
U.S. Senator and Minnesota Governor candidate Amy Klobuchar is outlining her health care agenda if she's elected governor. The primary is 16 days away, but Klobuchar isn't facing any real challenge for the Democratic nomination. Klobuchar says her administration would modernize aging hospitals and strengthen rural health systems. The senator also prioritized stable funding for EMS across greater Minnesota.
Several hospitals and clinics across Minnesota, many of them in rural areas, are at risk because of those Medicaid cuts, in addition to the premiums problems, but the Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bill. Or
of course. It's all Trump's fault. It's always Trump's fault. Oh, it's those pesky Medicaid cuts. That's why we're dealing with all of this. It's not like the DFL hasn't gone through their policies. It dramatically increased the cost of our health care here in the state of Minnesota, as if the fraud alone hasn't had an impact on that as well. Here's more from Fox 9.
Or as some call it, the big ugly bill. After these cuts fully kick in, more than 140,000 Minnesotans, think about that, could lose their health coverage.
Republican gubernatorial candidate Lisa Demuth pushed back, saying that many of those priorities are already underway, writing in part, quote, "I've already done it. Last session, we created a hospital stabilization fund and grants specifically for rural and critical access hospitals." We also reached out to Kendall Qualls, the state GOP pick for governor, and Mike Lindell, who has been endorsed by President Trump. So far, we haven't heard back from them yet. I'm Leon Purvis for Fox 9.
And again, that's coverage there from Fox 9. And but listen, I'll give some credit where credit is due for Fox 9 going and including another candidate in their reporting. Listen, make no mistake, those data points that I was sharing, right? The majority of Minnesotans believe that. I mean, the vast majority of Minnesotans believe we're on the wrong track. Kids in Mississippi can read better than kids in Minnesota. And I don't know why, but why does that? Like, I have nothing. Like, I harbor no ill will to Mississippi. But then I read that stat and I go, ugh. How are we doing worse than Mississippi? Even though, like, if you asked me, do you have a problem with Mississippi? I'd say no. But yet I hear that data point and I go, we should certainly be doing better than Mississippi. There's a stereotype there that I'm completely unaware of. Do you have any extensive thoughts there, Isaac, on Mississippi?
No. Except for Gopher football plays on Mississippi State this fall, so
okay.
Hopefully we can at least beat them there.
Who's favored?
Probably the Gophers.
Okay.
But not in reading, I guess.
All right. You can handle all the sports on the John Justice Show here, presented by American Experiment.
Deal.
Okay. Lady Klobuchar gets it, though. She understands these data points. Below average state economically. 55% of students can't do math at a grade level. These are all things that the Democrats, the DFL, want. They want the kids stupid and voting for Democrats. It's all done by design. By the way, just as a sidebar to this, is I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I'm a month out of practice, so cut me some slack. When we get into this playground slur case, right, and her being this Shiloh person being found guilty of disorderly conduct, this is going to happen more often. You know why it's going to? Because this will be appealed. They'll probably win the appeal. I have some fantastic audio from Shiloh's lawyer to share. And let me say up front, and I'll state it again a little bit later on, two things can be true at once. You can not like Shiloh as a person. You can absolutely be against what she said on the playground, but you can also be 100% in support of free speech and her right to say what she wants to say in public. I just want to be clear on that. But you're going to see more ridiculous nonsense like this and ridiculous anti-free speech convictions like this because the people that are making the decisions, that are choosing to convict an individual like this, who may not be a good person but still has a right to free speech, they've all gone through this same liberal indoctrination education system. Silence is violence, words are violence, and this is the ramifications of that. Now, we still have stopgaps involved. These things can still be appealed to rational adults who were not indoctrinated by the Marxist left-wing agenda. But if we don't do our part to make sure that we turn our education system around, and certainly here in Minnesota, this type of thing is going to happen more often, and appeals won't matter because those individuals issuing the appeals will be the same indoctrinated individuals that are convicting people for simply going and using their free speech. But one more point on Amy Klobuchar. She understands these data points, which is why she's actually coming out and acting like she wants to be governor here in Minnesota, which also makes the whole Mike Lindell illegal alien amnesty bungle even more confusing, in my opinion. You shouldn't be talking about anything other than the items and items related to the items that I just laid out in how Minnesota is on the wrong track and that are available at AmericanExperiment.org. That's all you should be talking about. Like last on your list, and it shouldn't even be on the list, is anything relating to any sort of amnesty whatsoever of illegal aliens. It was clear that Mike Lindell and his campaign were stuck in a moment that they simply could not get out of at the time. And again, keeping with that idea that two things can be true at once, you can still support Mike Lindell and his campaign for governor and still be against this idea that he has for amnesty for illegal aliens. As a matter of fact, that's what should happen. The staunch supporters of Mike Lindell, I would hope, would be vocal enough in saying, can you please just stop talking about that? You really should focus on these other things. Somebody give him a link to AmericanExperiment.org so that he can go and take a look at these data points for himself. Maybe he's just simply unaware.
Hey, John. Enjoying the podcast. Climate change. All this stuff about the wildfires, that is the climate changing. That is the earth renewing. Wow. How stupid can people be?
By the way, just really quick, because I want to get into this story from the Star Tribune just briefly. But let me say, you can call this a broadcast. I went back and forth with somebody online. Somebody was saying, well, you can't call it a broadcast. No, as a matter of fact, you can. If you look at the formal definition, Webster's dictionary says no. But if you look at the definition of broadcast, it used to be resigned to your television and radio, but they've added in the addition of streaming as a form of broadcasting. So do not hesitate to call this, the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, a broadcast. All right, quick intermission. I want to play for you a couple of clips that you might have missed. And some of these are aligned with exactly what I was talking about Minnesota being on the wrong track. From the American Experiment podcast, hosted by Catherine and Grace, who made an appearance on our first Dry Run Freedom Friday show. That is not an official Freedom Friday show that's available, by the way. I need to make that known. Because Max and AK, I think, were a little annoyed. Like, you guys had a Freedom Friday show and neither of us were there? No, it wasn't official. It was a dry run. Catherine and Grace were really thrown off because I had actually grabbed news items for Friday's show, and I think that they were just expecting us to talk about the nonsense. So I had to adjust on the fly in the middle of that because that was my bad. I didn't let them in on anything. But thankfully, they're both up to speed on the news, and certainly more so than I was for the first couple of weeks of January. So coming up, we'll dive into this ridiculous piece with the Gone Green update regarding the Canadian wildfire smoke. We'll look at the playground slur case as well. Representative Tom Emmer joins us at the top of the hour. Now here is a bit of what you might have missed from the American Experiment podcast here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
What's so sad to me is that nearly 60% of Minnesotans now say that our state is on the wrong track. And it has not always been like that.
Yeah, no. I mean, in 2020, the majority of Minnesotans actually thought we were on the right track. So in just, 6 short years, people's perspectives on the state have totally changed. People would be really surprised to know that Minnesota is a below average state economically.
Yeah, and that has not always been the case. And if you care about having higher wages, about having more jobs, you should care if your state is doing well economically. And for the first time in a long time, Minnesotans need to wake up and realize how far our education system has fallen too.
Yeah, especially when you think about the fact that students in Mississippi are reading better than students in Minnesota. I mean, that's a state that people criticize like crazy and love to make fun of in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And they're doing so much better than us.
That's That's insane. Well, and you think about, the kids that graduate in Minnesota not knowing how to read well, not being prepared for life. They're not just competing with other kids in Minnesota. They're competing at the national level for jobs, for opportunities, for a livelihood. And they're going to be behind other states like Mississippi.
Start a small business. Minnesota might be the worst state in the country to start one in.
Yeah. We literally tax small businesses more than any other state in the country. And by the way, most Minnesotans work for a small business. This impacts every single person.
Yeah, that's really crazy. You would think that we would want to encourage entrepreneurship. We would want to encourage small businesses in this state. Instead, we make it harder than literally any other state.
What's so cool to me about this presentation is that it is literally years in the making. It is the culmination of all of the work you've been doing since you came on here at American Experiment. But you trace the timeline back, 10 plus years ago even, right?
Yeah, back to 2014. We go back to the beginning of the CCAP, the child care subsidy fraud. Everybody remembers that. $100 million in suitcases going out of the airport. And that really was the first major industrial scale fraud we had in Minnesota. And a lot of the same people who were involved in the child care subsidy scandal were also then involved in the food scandal, the Feeding Our Future free food scandal. So we trace the evolution of the fraud from childcare to free food. And then when the free food fraud was shut down, a lot of the same people again moved into this Medicaid fraud. And the Medicaid fraud is where the real money has been, billions of dollars.
Funny
As
how
I
that
mentioned, $9 billion stolen from taxpayers. Where did the money go? Some of it went overseas. Some of it was shipped off for real estate, apartments in Nairobi, Kenya, cryptocurrency, factories in China, just all kinds of weird stuff. A lot of luxury goods, fancy cars, expensive handbags, shoes. So we had a lot of it just spent on consumer goods and trips to Las Vegas. But then we also trace some of it back to the politicians, the people who voted for this stuff, the people who enabled the fraud to begin with. So a lot of the most prominent politicians in Minnesota, it turns out, took campaign donations from individuals who are later convicted in these frauds. So we trace the money from the taxpayer through the programs and then back to the politicians in the form of campaign donation.
It's the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, americanexperiment.org. You can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. You can also leave a comment on the new comment line, and that number is 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565. Let's go back to the comment line here on the John Justice Show. I'm glad you're with us this morning.
There's an old saying that describes Kamala Harris's word salad that you just played, and it goes like this: if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with BS. Glad to hear that you're back again, John. It's so nice to get up in the morning and hear your voice again.
Thank you so much for that, Bob. Greatly appreciated. Again, 612-584-4565. So for the second year in a row, Minnesotans experienced some of the worst air quality in the world as hundreds of Canadian wildfires, along with more than a dozen in northern Minnesota, burned out of control and spread massive plumes of smoke across the state at the peak of summer. Last week, wildfires shattered air pollution records in many places, prompting the full closure and evacuation of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. I was just reading this morning that apparently those were supposed to be reopened this week if they're not already. Temporarily shut down water parks, outdoor concerts, art fairs across the Twin Cities due to the poor air quality. 19 Republican members of Congress, including Representatives Brad Finstad, Pete Stauber, wrote a scathing letter to the Environmental Protection Agency on Monday. In the letter, the lawmakers blamed Canada for the fires and accused its government of violating a 1991 environmental treaty initially created to address acid rain. We requested that the EPA take the appropriate measures to address the impact of the Canadian wildfire smoke on the Great Lakes in the Northeast. Canada must meet its clean air promise and prevent future wildfires from impacting our communities. You know what I can't get to the heart of? And I can't find the information. And I did some digging. Why are the fires starting in the first place? Why does this have to happen every single year? So born and raised in Southern California, we had the what they called the Santa Ana winds, and the Santa Ana winds would whip up, and inevitably in a warmer, drier summer season, we'd get these wildfires that would erupt. But it wasn't every single year. I mean, there were years where it was back to back, but there was a level of inconsistency to it. It just seems like now every single time of year that we land here, or we land on this time of year, we end up with these ridiculous wildfires, and nobody wants to address that. And instead, we play the blame game. And there's plenty of blame to go around. It is the second time since last summer that these lawmakers signed onto a letter blaming Canada for the high concentrations of wildfire smoke making its way into the state. Unlike last year, however, a significant portion of the air pollution last week came from wildfires ignited by lightning in Minnesota's side of the border. Oh, it's our fault. The lawmakers also take their criticisms of Canada's forest management practices a step further in this year's letter, accusing its government of violating that act that I mentioned earlier. As evidence, they point to a 2022 report from Parks Canada, which shows the federal agency completed fewer prescribed burns almost every year between 2014 and 2021. So nicknamed the Acid Rain Treaty, the AQA was signed back in 91 by then George H.W. Bush and the Canadian Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, setting strict limits on sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions, the toxic air pollutants primarily responsible for causing acid rain, and charged environmental regulators in both nations to reduce the levels of those pollutants. Now, the GOP lawmakers have based their opinion, said one British Columbia ecologist, Laurie Daniels, on one federal agency that manages a fraction of Canada's total forests. In British Columbia, she said, the Provincial Wildfire Service conducts 40 to 50 prescribed burns each year in coordination with the Indigenous nations and community organizations, more than double the number reported in most years by Parks Canada and the 2022 report. Color me shocked that somebody out of Canada is pushing back on a bunch of Republicans in the United States that are blaming them for the fact that they're not getting their mitigation efforts of the wildfires that occur every single year under control. Minnesota Representative Peter Fisher, a Democrat who co-chairs the Environmental House Natural Resources Finance and Policy Committee, said the Minnesota lawmakers should hold themselves accountable to the same standards. This letter feels more like an attempt to deflect blame rather than govern responsibly. You know what that means? That means that they're more concerned about Republicans going green, blaming this on climate change, reducing the mitigation efforts than they are about doing the right thing, ignoring what sort of impact those mitigation efforts may or may not have on the climate, to focus on making sure that if indeed there are natural causes that create these wildfires every single year, that you've done everything you possibly can to make sure they don't spread out of control with that smoke coming in and plaguing our skies here in Minnesota. Representative Finstad didn't respond to requests for an interview. In a statement to the Star Tribune, Stauber defended his position when asked to respond to the criticisms of the letter. He says, regarding the ongoing fires in the Boundary Waters, I'm fully aware that they were sparked by lightning strikes. As I have said for many years, we need to do a better job here in the U.S. to get rid of the overgrowth that has turned our forests into tinderboxes. There is absolutely no denying that the mitigation efforts in Canada and in some part here in the United States because of previous administrations have been mitigated and are not in the best interest of the residents here in Minnesota or Canada, but in the best interest of perpetuating the myth of global warming and climate change. This doesn't need to be this way every single year. And going back to what I mentioned before, earlier this hour, of how do we fix it? We fix it by stopping the perpetuation of those ridiculous narratives that end up having real world impacts. But that's not what the left is about. It's all about the indoctrination, whether it's taking place in our schools or whether it's taking place in public policy relating to natural disasters, doing that thing with my fingers, like lightning strikes that cause wildfires. They would rather have the wildfires raging out of control clogging up our skies and our lungs than to ever relent from their pursuit of perpetuating the idea of climate change so that they can take advantage of it and ultimately redistribute the wealth. John.justice@americanexperiment.org is the new email address. And again, if you want to leave a comment, you can do so. The new comment line number is 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565.
Good morning, John. This is Vic.
Oh, my apologies on that. That was on me.
Good morning, John. This is Vinny. Welcome back, brother.
Simple, straight, and to the point. Thank you, Vinny. I appreciate it. All right, let's go here. There were some people online that were wanting to know my views on the racial slur case, so let's get into it. From the Daily Wire, a Minnesota jury found a woman guilty of disorderly conduct after she repeatedly used a racial slur, the N-word, during a confrontation on a playground. So 37-year-old Shiloh Marie Hendricks, captured on video as a bystander, confronted her for allegedly directing a racial slur at an autistic child. Although the alleged remark itself was not captured on video, the bystander urged Hendricks to repeat it while he was recording the encounter. Rochester City Attorney Michael Spindler-Krage charged Hendricks with 2 counts of disorderly conduct, one for her alleged behavior towards the child, and the other for her confrontation with the bystander. All right, let's back up here just a moment. You don't get any of this on film, and it only has an impact on the individuals in that moment on that playground, and that's where this whole thing should have stayed. It's not the world that we live in. It was caught on video. People want to perpetuate, once again, their false narratives, this idea of systemic racism in the United States. And unfortunately for Shiloh Hendricks, she ended up getting into the spotlight for that very reason. The fact that she was charged at all is absurd. And I'll state again, multiple things can be true at once. You don't have to like her. You don't have to like what she said on the playground. You can push back on using that type of language. I don't endorse using that type of language. I don't encourage my boys to use that type of language. And there's other indications that Shiloh Hendricks may not be a good person in and of herself. And I would actually make an argument that if she's willing to go and use that type of language, even in this case wherein she was being stolen from, and then being pushed to go and use this to use this language, she may not be a very good person, but she still has her right to free speech. I think we've all forgotten sticks and stones may break my bones, break our bones, but words will never hurt us. Okay. She was sentenced to 1 year supervised probation, fined $1,000, and ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. She faces a 90-day jail sentence only if she violates her terms of probation. The man who recorded the confrontation, Sharmaki Belay Omar, was previously charged in a sexual assault case involving a 16-year-old girl. Prosecutors later dismissed those charges in the interest of justice, according to this article from the Daily Wire. Now, according to the criminal complaint, the confrontation began after an 8-year-old autistic boy took an applesauce pouch from Hendricks' diaper bag. Both Hendricks and the boy's father chased the child as he climbed onto the playground equipment in an attempt to get away. Hendricks allegedly then shouted at him, repeatedly using the racial slur. Now, while recording on his phone, Omar asked Hendricks why she called the child the racial slur, noting that the boy was autistic. Okay. Just as a side note, Hendricks knew that at the time. She was aware. And does that make a difference in the totality of the story? I don't feel like that. I don't feel like it does. When Omar continued confronting Hendricks, her response was, "I don't give a blank," and blank off. The defense attorney, Brian Carlos, said, I think it's pathetic. I think it's sad. I think it's sick. This is fraud upon the community. Carlos argued the government was prosecuting a young lady for language. You know, we've all sort of watched back in horror what's been taking place in Europe and the draconian measures in which authorities have been cracking down on individuals and their speech. I do not want to see that occur here in the United States. And this whole free speech issue, this racial slur case, is the first step of that happening more often. I hope this is appealed. I hope she wins the appeal. Again, I don't agree with what she said. She's probably not a good person, but she's got her right to free speech. Now, getting back to Carlos's argument, again, prosecutors say she was prosecuting a young lady for language, and this trial was a result of cancel culture. He added that Hendrick's choice of words was inappropriate, but there's a difference between inappropriate and illegal. Prosecutor Nicholas Schabel argues that jurors should consider both Hendrick's conduct and her language. Schabel argued that Hendrick screaming at the child, her demeanor, her language, all speak to this. All of those were appropriate for consideration. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, set up a GoFundMe for the child that raised more than $340,000. The incident, of course, drew backlash from conservatives. Notably, in the story from the Daily Wire, they quote the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh, who said, the Shiloh Hendricks case isn't even a close call or a gray area. She was charged and convicted for a crime of saying a word. If that's not a violation of the First Amendment, nothing is. This is one of the most straightforward free speech issues we've seen in a long, long time. Often, though, these types of things need to happen to establish a new baseline in a society that unfortunately is heading further and further in this type of direction. Free speech turning into hate speech, turning into prosecution. Silence is violence. And as I said, if this is appealed, and it should be appealed, hopefully the charges end up getting dropped. We're going to be talking with our next guest, Representative Tom Emmer, here in just a moment on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. I do have audio to share with you first, though. Hendrick's defense attorney, Brian Carlos, said he plans to appeal the conviction. Here's a little bit of what he had to say to reporters. The audio itself, just give it a minute. You have a hard time hearing the reporter's question, but you can definitely hear the attorney's response.
Did your client show any remorse after getting out of the courtroom today regarding the statement by the NAACP president about the impact that this incident had on the community as a whole?
You asked me this before. This is for you people. This is a clown show. The community. The community doesn't give a shit. Okay? I'm voir-diring the community. Half the people in the jury room are like, when I'm voir-diring them, why are we here? What is this about? Why are we, what's going on? You asked me this before, like, oh, what about... I did not ask you that before. No, last interview, you said, oh, what about the community? Like, how has it affected the community? There is such a tiny percentage of people that drive this stuff now. Your cancel culture, you write this stuff, let's make it go viral. You're all part of the same sickness, right? Oh, how do we get hits and clicks? And you're dying. You're dying. Your news organizations are literally dying because nobody believes you anymore.
What about the fact that Jake Lang was there?
I asked this jury in this trial, who here believes the media anymore? Who here looks at the media and go, I don't know what to believe. I don't really trust any of these people anymore. They all raise their hand.
What does this have to do with
Because all you look for are hits and clicks. You're going to cut this in a way that benefits your hits and clicks, and you're dying. You're just dying. You guys are dinosaurs. Oh, keep going. It does. You're not going to give anyone an honest shake. You're not going to do the research. You're not going to look up Rule 901. You're not going to press the prosecutor. You're not going to press the judge. You know what you're going to press? Whatever woke shit you can come up with. That's what you guys push. Woke shit. Over and over and over again. Do your jobs. Investigate. Maybe learn something. Be fair. Have you ever thought about that? Fairness? Try it. Try it sometime.
Hey, John, great first show. This is Zima Metal Wave. Hey, John, great first show. This is Nima Metal Wade. Also along the Shiloh thing, she did not have the Sixth Amendment right to face her accuser because he was in Somalia. There's so much wrong with this case besides the egregious First Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Wade. My apologies as I get used to the equipment here on the show. We're going to bring in Representative Tom Emmer here in just a moment. It is the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Let's go and hear from Curtis.
So, John, this little Somali kid was labeled as autistic. Well, so of 80% of the Somali kids, so they could all get their fingers into the autism scam. So there's a good chance he really wasn't autistic. He was just sort of a snotty brat.
Does it ultimately matter? I mean, I guess that was the point that I was trying to make in the story. Listen, regardless of whether or not the kid was autistic or not autistic, it's kind of irrelevant to the entire issue. I mean, I get what the media is attempting to do. They're attempting to say, hey, you know what? She shouldn't have used that language, and she certainly shouldn't have used that language if the boy was autistic. And that's why it was brought up during the trial. It's the whole idea of it being a hate crime as opposed to a crime. They want to add another layer to it. They needed to get a conviction on this because they wanted to establish a new baseline. Exactly what I was talking about a moment ago. This is where the country is heading. I hope this is appealed. It doesn't mean that Shiloh was a good person. It doesn't mean that what she did was right. No, it was wrong. But she does have her free speech. And now she has been convicted of disorderly conduct for basically just saying a word. It's absolutely ridiculous.
With all the Minnesota fraud with autism, I'm just wondering, did the child actually have autism? Because that's kind of, I don't know, maybe 80% chance of being false.
Yeah, again, I just don't see how relevant it is. All right, let's go ahead and break away from this. If you want to add further comments on the issue of the free speech slur case, you can do that. Leave us a comment. 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565. You can also email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. It's john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I see Representative Tom Emmer on the screen. Is Representative Tom Emmer able to? You want to join us? You want to join us now? You good to go?
I'm absolutely good to go.
Good morning, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning, especially on such a short notice. It's been about a month since we've had a chance to talk. I didn't know when we would have a chance to talk in this sort of format again, but I am so blessed to have you on and for you to be a part of my first show here at Center of the American Experiment. So thanks for joining us this morning, Tom.
Hey, John, I'm happy that you are there. I thank the Center for the American Experiment because your voice, your platform is so necessary in our corrupt political state in Minnesota. So congratulations. I hope this is a huge success.
So let's get into a couple of different issues. I know that you've made some comments as of late as we continue to debate and attempt to get the Save America Act passed. And I know you've been critical of the Senate's delay in this. The House has passed versions of this. Where do things rest right now? And I have to imagine, Tom, that even if the Senate was able to get their act together and to pass this, I mean, would it be impactful at all before November? Where are we at on this crucial issue of getting the Save America Act passed?
Well, you know, if I relate it to Minnesota, your last part of the question, would we be able to use any of it by November? The people that are running our elections, and I've known Steve Simon since we served together in the Minnesota House, the fact that he will not produce the voting information that the federal government is asking for, in my mind, that's proof that you have a corrupt system. Otherwise, you'd give it all. There's no reason that you would hold it back. And I can't understand why in Minnesota, no media outlet, nobody who cares is hammering this guy over and over. He did one interview on a station that I won't name, and I talked to the people after, and they said, oh, well, he had great answers. There is no answer, John. You either have the documents and you're going to produce them or you don't. So I don't feel great about Minnesota, even when we get this done. This is going to be a battle with Minnesota. You're going to have to clean out all the closets and the crookedness and I mean, we become, 1980s Louisiana, for God's sakes. We're going to have to clean. We're worse, maybe. But now, related to Washington, yes, I have been critical of the Senate, John. The filibuster and the parliamentarian, these are two tools that they use to avoid taking difficult votes. This is why I say there are no Democrats and there are no Republicans. There are only senators, okay? Because they take care of each other when it comes to these votes. All right, let's assume the filibuster is not going to go anywhere, and let's assume I'm wrong, that it's not, something that they use to avoid votes. The other thing that nobody's talking about, and we just did this last week, we passed a budget resolution for a third reconciliation bill. Attached to it was the Save America Act. Now that goes over to the Senate. If they start to move that, and remember, this is just the first step. The bill hasn't been written yet. This unlocks the ability for the relevant committees, in this case it'd be Ag and it'd be the Foreign Affairs probably, and the committees that are responsible for intelligence and the Defense Committee. Great. But before they can write those pieces, the Senate has to pass the identical budget resolution that we did. So it goes to the parliamentarian, John. The parliamentarian likely will say, Save America's out. Even with the grant stuff, they might piecemeal it because there's grant language in there. Nobody seems to want to talk about the fact that you can overrule the parliamentarian, and there's history for this, with 50+1 votes. So yes, I've been very critical. Where are they at right now, John? They're here for the next 2 weeks. The House is already on the road, doing constituent work, campaigning, whatever Republicans and Democrats in the House do during August. We'll be back on August 31st in session. In the meantime, they're here for 2 weeks. John Thune has made it very clear. He's going to work on a funding bill, a CR with anomalies for September. Okay, what about the budget resolution? Apparently, he's not interested right now in moving it. So there's going to be a lot of pressure that comes to bear. Mike Lee, I see, is going to bring a motion that will not pass, but it'll put people in a very difficult position. And that position is to skip the August recess and stay in Washington and get this stuff done. And then people like John Kennedy from Louisiana have been pretty public about he just doesn't think the Senate is being bold enough. And we'll see. Maybe those types of senators can get the leadership to start to move. But yeah, I'm frustrated, John. If you can't pass an 80% issue, when I say 80%, voter ID and proof of citizenship, you got over 70% of Democrats who agree with that. So when you look at it, it literally is all of America that wants this. So 80% of Americans want it. How the heck can't you pass it? And if you can't, what are you doing in the Senate?
Well, and I haven't had a chance to get to it on the show because we hadn't started it yet. But, it was just, a week ago where you had President Donald Trump, doing a nationwide address talking about China, accessing 220 million U.S. voter files, the deep state hiding the evidence. I mean, one would hope that this would bring about perhaps a change of mind for some of those Republican holdouts that don't want to go and back the Save America Act. Of course, the story got buried by the mainstream media. I think probably most of America has forgotten about this to our own detriment. But what is the driving force behind, in your mind, Representative Tom Emmer, those members of the GOP and the Senate that simply don't want to go along with this? I think that's the question that I have, and I know a question a lot of the viewers and listeners have.
Well, you put me in an awkward position, especially in the House, because as the whip, I got to work with everybody, John.
Sure. Understandable.
Personally, I don't have to agree, whatever. They've been elected by 700,000 people, some 700,000. I need to respect them as the voice of those 700,000 people. But Tom Emmer, separately, I will go at it this way. Minnesotans will remember a third baseman named Gary Gaetti from about 35 years ago. I believe it was Gary Gaetti who once said it's awful difficult to play third base with both hands placed firmly around your throat, John. I think we overthink things. I think we get a little overly sensitive. I think some of them are very concerned about the mail-in ballot stuff, right? Because when you do the full Save America Act, Donald Trump doesn't want any mail-in ballots. I think most of them agree with the citizenship proof and then voter ID at the polls. But until, this is where I would defend them. Until they know it's going to be law, I think, well, you're talking about the senators, so I can be pretty good. Yeah, John, if we go look at them, my guys are pretty good with this. If you go look at them, this is ridiculous. What are you objecting to?
Yeah.
And by the way, why don't you help us then fix it so that we can make sure our elections are open, honest, and reliable? And this thing from a couple weeks ago, this is what we've been dealing with in Minnesota for years, John. I mean, you started to see it with the Norm Coleman race. You saw it with our governor's race in 2010. You saw it with Trump in both times he ran. The first time, you saw it because they didn't think he was going to win, so they didn't do anything. The second time, they allege he lost by 7 points when he won Tim Walz's hometown by 30. Come on, John. Let's see the homework. Let's be able to study what's actually been happening in Minnesota and why have we gone off the rails. Well, our press just goes, there's nothing to see here. And those of you that say that this is all about voter integrity, you're the problem. Well, I don't think we are. And I think it's the media that's the problem. And the Democrats, they just want to cheat. They want to be able to cheat. Even the ones who don't know, right? They don't know. You had one, you and I talked about this. Remember, a month or two ago, we talked about a Democrat in the House who said the reason you don't have to clean the dead people off the Minnesota voter rolls is because if a dead person's name votes, it's like a voter integrity thing. You can research it. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. We had talking with Representative Tom Emmer, and again, thank you so much for joining the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment. Let's talk a little positivity, because I know you've had some positive things to say about your perception of how things are going to go later this year. We had Andrew Langer on, president of the Institute for Liberty, good friend of mine, and on every Monday. He continues to be concerned about the upcoming election and the GOP's chances. But I know that you've been speaking to the media with a different viewpoint on that. Where is the enthusiasm in your mind when it comes to Republican voters as we look towards November? And certainly we can't relinquish any power, and we'd like to expand that a bit. So where is your head at right now on the GOP's chances later on this year, Tom?
I'm still bullish, John. I'm still bullish. This is a business where, I've had more success than I've had failure in the last 6 years, but I could be wrong. I just look at it this way. Everybody's focusing on gas prices. Okay, they could be impactful. There's no question. But you brought up voter enthusiasm, which I'll hit, and people are nervous about, and people, by the way, that do this every day are nervous about what the fall brings. So
sure.
Let's help them. First off, affordability is a nonsense term to me. Why? And by the way, this just shows how brilliant Democrats and their left-wing media, that is basically the communication arm for the Democrat Party, which is now the Socialist, Marxist, Anarchist Party of America, they echo it. And what do? They start late last year, beginning of this year. It's about affordability, right? And which was interesting because who destroyed people's ability to buy things? It was Joe Biden and 4 years of that. But they grabbed it. Affordability was the issue. Why do I think affordability is nonsense? Because, John, it's just another word for the economy. Every election comes down to the economy. That's what I believe, and I think others have said it, even Democrats. I think James Carville is famous for it's about the economy, stupid. So Democrats do affordability. Why? Because you can pick out what you want to and focus on it. That is not the whole economy. That's just a piece of it. And then their left-wing media starts focusing on it. You know who that's intended for? So people do not all of us in America, and certainly in Minnesota, wear a partisan jersey year-round like I do, right? In fact, I would argue, without having empirical evidence, that it's maybe 8 out of 10 people don't care every day. What are they doing? They're trying to earn a living. They're trying to pay a mortgage. They're trying to put food on the table and clothes on the kids. And you know what they're doing in the first quarter of a new year? A lot of these families, John, because we used to do it, they're sitting down going, where are we taking our family vacation next summer, right? What impacts a family vacation more than perhaps anything else? The cost of travel. So it's brilliant by the other side. And what do Republicans do? They do the same thing. They start adopting the term. Oh, we're going to have hearings on affordability. You literally have bolstered the term that they're using. So the good news for me is Trump was talking about how when the Iran situation gets resolved, you will see these come down very fast, right? Now, this went on and on and on, and then Trump said, we're doing a peace deal. We've got a agreement in principle. And as they started to move through the peace deal, anybody who was paying attention in these nonpartisan people saw those things tumbling down, right? Unfortunately, the peace deal fell through, and they've started to climb back up again. I don't know if that'll help at the end of the day, because people understand it's related to the war, and if they're upset with the war, that could have an impact. But I don't believe that is going to be the thing that takes us down, because most people are going to focus on the economy. And what's going to happen, John, is by September, there are great things happening in the economy right now, but people's perception needs to meet the reality, and it hasn't yet. I mean, real wages are climbing faster than inflation. I was talking to a major bank CEO last week who told me their consumer data shows that the people who are not the wealthy customers, but those that are on the lower half of the data, John, their wages have exceeded. They've caught up inflation. They are not increasing their credit, which is amazing. And guess what? Their spending is up 6% from a year ago. It doesn't match the narrative that is out there. It shows something else. And now I'll finish with two things. One, redistricting. We got about 20-some seats that we can go after, John. Democrats have 7, maybe 7 or 8, because of the redistricting thing. That's good news for Republicans. And the enthusiasm. Remember, they told us that there's no enthusiasm on our side? You saw it in Minnesota precinct caucuses last beginning of the year. There was huge turnout. But the way they reported it was, it's kind of quiet, whatever. No, you guys are, our press lies regularly. And I'm not a big fan of polls. I would argue that I'll tell you that a poll that agrees with me is a great poll, and a poll that doesn't agree with me is a piece of you-know-what. Why? Because we are still polling the way we've always polled in the last 10, 20, 30 years. The problem is, John, people aren't picking up the phone. They don't have landlines. And by the way, the ones that do talk to them, news flash to people listening, they don't always tell the truth. Now, why does the Star Tribune, KSTP, all these guys use the polls? Because they're defensible. The math, the way they do them, they're defensible. But I would argue the data is not accurate. Trump and his campaign showed us in 2016 how to do it. The internet is much better showing you the data as to what is motivating people and what is trending and all the rest. not the way we've been doing it for years. So, but I tell you that to put in context, there is a Harris survey. I don't know if you saw it. Within the last couple of weeks, they surveyed voter enthusiasm. And I don't think they were looking to benefit Republicans, but I found this one incredibly interesting because typically in a non-presidential year, you have a huge enthusiasm gap, or at least some enthusiasm gap, and we don't start to catch up until September, October. Well, the Harris poll, again, done within the last at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the Harris poll divvied it up this way, John. It cut out MAGA Republicans. That was the first thing. Then Republicans, then Democrats, and I just want to point out or emphasize, they didn't break out the type of Democrat, socialist, Marxist, anarchist, just Democrat. And then they did independents. It was pretty interesting. 85% of MAGA Republicans, remember, these are the guys we were told are not going to show up in November without Trump on the ballot. Right. 85%, so 8 out of 9 say they are going to show up. Okay? Second, the Republican and Democrat, they were both at 78%. So almost 8 out of 10 Republicans and 8 out of 10 Democrats. And by the way, we don't know what that means. I mean, are they Mamdani Democrats? Are they whatever? Plattner Democrats? We just know they're both at 78%. So it's like 8 out of 10 that are going to show up. And then independents were 65%. So 6 or 7 out of 10 will show up. John, I don't know. This is July. To have that kind of voter enthusiasm, if that poll has any merit or that survey, I'm very bullish still.
Well, I was certainly encouraged on my my trips with my son, as I've been mentioning for those 2 weeks at the beginning of the month. Traveled about 5,000 miles, 10 states, and saw America in a way that I hadn't seen in a long time, being disconnected from the mainstream media, and was just encouraged by the level of patriotism that's out there. And I think that benefits Republicans, certainly the way the Democrats have vilified and demonized anybody who wants to go and love this country. So from your lips to God's ear, Tom Emmer. And before I let you go, how are you spending some of your time off? I know this is not Emmer weather outside by any stretch of the imagination, but what are you doing right now with a little bit of free time? Do you have any free time right now?
No, not right now, but I will in the coming weekend, because this has been set aside for a while, which I'll get to. I'll be traveling. I'm going to hit, this is what I do. I think I'm going to hit 3 or 4 cities in 3 days, 4 cities in 3 days, before coming back to Minnesota at the end of the week. And I got a block at the end of Minnesota, John. I achieved what I think is one of my greatest accomplishments, the greatest accomplishments in my life, and I'm going to continue to achieve. Jackie and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So we're getting together with the kids for a couple of days at the end of the week, and then I'll be at Farm Fest and other stuff. We're just going to be working. Can't sit still, John. Just like you. I'm glad you're working again.
Thank you, Tom. We've got to get you in. Got to get you in studio next time we have the opportunity. But I'm so thankful you can join us this way as well.
I would love it, John. Congrats.
Well, great talking with you, Representative Tom Emmer. Looking forward to hopefully catching up with you again next week. And thank you so much for joining us on this debut episode of the John Justice Show. We'll talk to you again real soon, my friend.
Take care, John.
All right, coming up. Actually, let me go here just briefly while Tom gets off the line here. From the Minnesota Reformer, I don't want to get into much detail of this because it's really not worth it. There's one point to be made from this really ridiculous piece. It relates to what we were talking about in the election. The blueprint for fighting Trump's attempt to sabotage the election drawn up in Minnesota. This is a DFL shill hack, J. Patrick Kulikin, who writes this: the feckless response of American elites to President Donald Trump's authoritarian attempt the past decade has often been a failure of imagination. Oh, surely he'll leave office after he loses. Oh, his immigration officers surely won't roam our streets racially profiling people and killing our neighbors. It doesn't get, I mean, that's just pure propaganda. I've been using that word a lot, but it is. There's no other way to describe it. He goes on to write, brazenness is a key tool of tyrants. So, of course, his personality, right? Can't really point to anything. I mean, he tries to in this piece. But he can't really point to anything tangible. But he goes with brazenness is a key tool of tyrants. Isaac, you haven't known me very long, okay? You've worked on the show for the first 2 dry run shows in this show. Is there any way, and I won't take offense if you say yes, but would you call me brazen in any way?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
But we have a lot of time to change that.
Yeah. I think I've been abrasive, perhaps. But brazenness being a tool of tyrants. I think I've been brazen in the past. Both personal and political, he writes. Just as you're shocked into inaction when someone cuts the line at airport security, so too Trump relies on baffling our expectations, which is what should concern us about the upcoming election and his efforts to interfere with the people's right to vote and to have their voices counted. The redirect on this is utterly ridiculous. Restricting people's right to vote, no, it's about making sure that only people who have the right to vote can vote. And to make sure that there's a fair and accurate count relating to when an election occurs. But this is the redirect they want to give you, that this is taking away people's right to vote. Yeah, it is. But not individuals who actually have a right to vote. It's taking away the ability of people to vote who should not have been voting in the first place. Now, he goes on to point to what I mentioned last week with Representative Tom Emmer. Trump used a nationally televised address Thursday to spew more outlandish misinformation about our election system as a pretext for aggressive federal intervention. He endorsed Mike Lindell, the MyPillow mogul, who has done more than anyone save Trump to cast bad faith doubt on Minnesota's election integrity for governor on Wednesday of last week. In response, Minnesota faith and labor civil society leaders have declared, not this time. And then what happens is another 3 pages of garbage, pure garbage, talking about various organizations, those that are pushing back on the Trump administration, the efforts that they're going through to try to keep things like the Save America Act from passing. But there's something else here. It's the absence of something that's most important. Any sort of concern whatsoever over what Trump said last week. It's almost as if the more President Donald Trump exposes that which should concern all Americans, regardless of political party, the more the left digs their heels in to undermine what it is that President Trump is trying to share. If it's of greater concern, the more the left is going to go and dismiss it. And that's exactly what happened in this sham piece from the DFL hack shill J. Patrick Hooligan. The mainstream media completely blew past what Trump said. If you had any, I don't care who it is, any Democrat president come out, hold a nationwide address, as President Donald Trump did, announcing the release of declassified documents alleging that China hacked into U.S. voter registration databases, thus acquiring 220 million voter files, claims that the deep state, in this case, in the scenario that I'm laying out, it would have been Republicans, right? If this was a Democrat sharing this information, and the claims of deep state suppression, that would have been pointed to Republicans. Suppressing the information, that this information and that China aimed to influence the 2020 election against him, Trump also asserted that China paid U.S. journalists to write negative stories about him and attempted to manufacture ballots for Biden. If that had been said by, and I know I'm not the first one to say it, but I haven't had a chance to cover this because I haven't been on the air for a month. If that had been a Democrat president saying that, we would still be talking about it today. It would still be headline news. There would be congressional committees. There would be prominent talking heads in the mainstream media pointing to the dramatic concern over this. Even going so far as to allege that this was an act of war in what China did. Because there's an argument to be made that it was, or that it is. But once again, it puts on full display just how deep Trump derangement goes into the psyche of individuals that simply cannot relent from their hatred of President Donald Trump to the detriment of the United States of America. And listen, let me add something to this. Because if you need an example of this, as reported last week, New Jersey said a software error is what allowed the state to register thousands of non-U.S. citizens to vote. And about 400 of them wrongly cast ballots in recent elections. When you consider, let's just say for the sake of argument, you look at the last legislative session, the balance of power here in Minnesota, with the priority in the House and the DFL only having a handful of seats in the Senate, and some of those races having to have been rerun because of DFL shenanigans, other seats changed because of DFLans breaking into people's homes, and you consider some of these races came down to just a handful of votes. 400 wrongly cast ballots in recent elections, I don't care where you are, can make all the difference in the world. The bombshell disclosure by Governor Mickey Sherrill last week, the Democrat, said between June of 2023 and 2024, about 6,600 people indicated that they were applying for a state's driver's license or identification card that were not U.S. citizens. I'm sure that hasn't happened here, though, right? I'm sure with our driver's licenses for all, because, you know, Secretary of State Steve Simon is so willing to give out the needed information about our voter rolls to make sure this type of thing is, I mean, he's just been so transparent about all of it. Mm-hmm. But the State Motor Vehicle Commission software system ended up registering them to vote through no fault of their own. Oh, it was a computer glitch. Mm-hmm. The governor, a former lawmaker who took office in January, said the software blunder occurred under then Governor Phil Murphy's administration and that she discovered it only last week. She asked the state's legal counsel to conduct an investigation, the findings of which she revealed on Tuesday. She said the vendor will be replaced. Oh, I'm good. I'm glad that they're on top of it. Now, the White House ended up seizing on New Jersey's disclosure last week, using it, appropriately so, as new evidence that a stronger election safeguard is needed, arguing that the incident validates President Donald Trump's push for the Save America Act and tougher voter verification requirements. And I think it also underscores of why, because I was being sarcastic before in case you didn't pick up on it, why Secretary of State Steve Simon is so reluctant to release that information, because he probably knows what's in it. And it's probably going to validate a lot of Minnesotans' concerns and the Trump administration's concerns, whether it's here in Minnesota or other states, that there's a lot of individuals right now casting ballots here in Minnesota that aren't legalized to do so. Democrats and their media allies have repeatedly said that it's impossible for non-citizens to register to vote, yet let alone cast a ballot, according to the White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson to the Washington Examiner. Time and time again, they've been proven wrong. As President Donald Trump said, there's nothing more important than the integrity of our elections. The latest incident underscores the absolute necessity of the Save America Act. Jackson said American voters deserve to have confidence that our elections are safe and secure, and pledged that Trump will never stop fighting to make that happen. The New Jersey Democrat governor last week, again, announced it was 6,600 non-citizens mistakenly, were registered to vote. The affected individuals, they say, specifically answered no when asked whether they were U.S. citizens when applying for a driver's license or identification card. But the system registered that anyways. Or was the system designed to do that? Or did somebody in charge of the system? Let's just back up for a moment. Maybe these individuals didn't realize that they were registered to vote. And then when they realized they were registered to vote, they were surprised, saying, you know what, I'm here illegally, but look, I can go vote. I'm going to go vote. There's no chance, right, that there was somebody within the New Jersey government that opened up the door to allow that to happen? To mistakenly go and register a bunch of individuals who are here illegally, non-citizens, to vote? Yeah. I'm sure there will be a thorough investigation as I continue to exude an immense amount of sarcasm upon you during this debut John Justice show presented by American Experiment broadcast. Yes, you can call it a broadcast. All right, coming up. Let's talk a little bit about Democrats being in disarray, because that's always fun. From the Daily Wire, the Democrat National Committee is reportedly $2 million in debt. Flat broke, a DNC meltdown is sparking panic on the left. On top of this, you've got the Democrat Socialists of America getting all kinds of attention as of late. And it's good, because much like the Shiloh Hendricks slur case, that maybe that needed to happen in order to reestablish what it means to be able to exercise free speech in this country. Some people need to be informed and educated on what socialists actually want to do. And they are not hiding what they want to do, as will be evidenced in the audio that I have coming up in just a moment on the show. First off, though, if you follow me on social media, you can find me on various social media platforms at John J-O-N Justice. Apart from doing the show, I'm also putting up commentary and sharing that online. I want to get you up to speed on some of my commentary that I've shared as of late online. And then up next, we'll get to this story about the Democrat National Committee being in debt, and we'll talk a little Governor Tim Walz. Taxpayer-funded trans dolls with removable genitalia hitting classrooms in the fall. Yeah, it's about as gross as you would believe that it is. It's all coming up here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Minnesota Attorney General Thief Ellison was at an event over the course of the past few days and was asked by a reporter about the allegations that he was aware, along with Governor Tim Walz, of the fraud for years here in Minnesota, specifically focusing on that $8 billion estimated fraud that has taken place here in the state. Listen to his answer, because people are missing a really important point about what the Minnesota Attorney General actually said. Watch.
If you look at, if you ask the newspapers for a forensic accounting, the number you mentioned is tightly identified with people of a very unique political persuasion aligned with the Trump administration. So I'm done talking to you. Bye-bye.
No, I just wanted you to clear up the number. I'm not quoting. I'm quoting several reports.
I get it. It's wrong, though. And if you're a real reporter, you should know.
I will report that you're saying it's wrong.
It is such a lazy, typical leftist tactic to go and answer the question by aligning it with the political opposition, that party, and then not bothering to go and give an answer at all. You see, Attorney General Thief Ellison, if he actually was good at his job, wasn't an activist, he would have known it would have been better to go and point to, there's a difference between the estimates of the amount of fraud here in Minnesota and the actual tangible numbers of the individuals who have been arrested and tried. There's a difference there. It's absolutely correct. No, I firmly believe that those $8 billion estimates are true for me personally, but that would have been the professional leadership way to go and answer the question. To say, you're talking about an estimate. There are conflicting sources and conflicting views on what that estimate is, and that estimate is a lot higher than the actual tangible numbers that we know for sure of the amount of money attached to the fraud in Minnesota. Thank you for your time. Walk away. See, was that difficult? Was it? But see, Keith Ellison does know what he's doing, because he's feeding his base. You see, his base doesn't want to hear facts or the reality. They simply want to be angry. They just want to hear what they want to hear, and typically that's associated with what the mainstream media tells them on a daily basis, because that's pretty much So after that George W. Bush appointed judge ridiculously slapped down the subpoenas against Governor Dim Walz, Keith Ellison, Minneapolis man-baby mayor Mom Jean's Jacob Fry in their investigation of encouraging individuals to get in the way of lawful law enforcement of ICE, Governor Dim Walz has now put forward a Freedom of Information request for documentation relating to communications from the Trump administration that mention the words Minnesota Walz, reckoning, retribution, punish, or Democrat. You see, lame duck Dim Walz is going to now try to seek his own revenge against the Trump administration for what he believes was false targeting of the Democrats here in Minnesota with what they did in encouraging individuals armed with only their cell phones to go out and obstruct the lawful law enforcement of immigrations and customs enforcement agents. What's even more ridiculous about this is that we all knew that Governor Walz was never going to be focusing on fraud. When the fraud story exploded earlier this year, a part of the operations of ICE here in Minnesota, he told Republicans that he was going to ride them harder than they've ever been ridden regarding tackling fraud. But what is he more concerned about? He's more concerned about his own political future and seeking his own version of revenge and retribution against the Trump administration for daring to come after him. This is what Marxist communists do. And once again, Governor Dim Walz has proven that he does not care about the people of Minnesota. He only cares about himself and the left-wing extreme political agenda.
I 100% agree with you about this crazy reaction to the Trump-China report. You know, the Democrats have done exactly what you're saying because if they were in charge right now, because they did that exact thing in 2016 to 2017 when the intelligence community rewrote the Russia assessment to create the Russia collusion hoax, and the media was all over it. And we actually know that that was false. So it's a completely different situation. And they took false information and made it sound like it was the most important thing in the world. It's just crazy.
That was James Dickey. Really, thank you, James, for the comment. Greatly appreciated as we continue. And we head into the final segment for the debut show here at the John Justice Show at Center of the American Experiment, presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. If you would like to leave a comment as well, you can do so. 612-584-4565. Again, that's 612-584-4565. And you can take part in our comment line just like Michael.
Good morning, John. Mike from Minnetonka. So great to hear your voice on a Monday morning. Just wanted to give you kudos for both Tom and Andy, having them both on. I mean, we all want to look through this next election cycle through rose-colored glasses, but I believe it's most beneficial for the party to hear both sides of the equation so we know what we're getting ourselves into. Great show, John. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Michael. I see some people are already hopping on the great show so far bandwagon. That really threw Isaac off a moment ago. We were perusing some of the social media commentary, and John, you're getting a lot of good shows so far. And I'm like, yeah, I get that a lot. I get that a lot. I get a lot of the good shows so far. Well, thank you for that on our debut run here. Let's go from here and hear from another friend of the show. This is Mike out of Clearwater.
Hi, John. It's Mike from Clearwater. It's great to hear your show. I'm just letting you know I'm listening. I will be listening to you every day. On the SAVE Act, President Trump, if there was ever a time in our nation's history where we need to have a vice president to take over the Senate, passing voter ID would be very important. So I think President Trump can solve this problem by making J.D. Vance take over the Senate, get rid of the parliamentarian and put in his own, and get the SAVE Act passed. That's just my opinion. Thank you. Bye.
Mike, I think you're on this. You're on the right track. I have a series of immigration stories, some of which relate here to Minnesota. David Zimmer here at American Experiment has a fantastic piece up at AmericanExperiment.org that, time permitting, I'll dive into. U.S. border security and immigration enforcement, undeniable success amid the noise. I bring it up because, and I almost mentioned it with with Representative Tom Emmer a moment ago. But the whole Save America Act and shoring up our election integrity, suddenly now it feels like the immigration issue. And not in a good way. I'll never forget, although I forgot last week. It's funny I say never forget because I did. I wrote it down and I wanted to talk about it last week. Years ago, and I haven't talked to her in a lot of years, S.E. Cup, okay? A friend of mine, although she has absolutely turned to the dark side, and I would have no problems whatsoever saying that to her face because I know that she would have no problems whatsoever saying to my face that she didn't like the fact that I was a part of MAGA. To that point, I remember the last time that I ever appeared on her show, and this was several years back. She had me on specifically to talk about border security, building of the wall, and President Donald Trump. And I took a pro-Trump stance, and she got on me in the middle of the segment. And subsequently, she never invited me back on again. Unlike this show, I'll have all comers. You want to come on the show? Foes of the show, the new talkback number is 612-584-4565. I'm here to tell you I have not heard from any foes of the show yet. Although, when you consider foes of the show, whether it's the pickleball coach or Phil or, the pickleball coach is the voice disguised Eric from Brainerd. Listen, we're not talking about, the brightest bulbs. I think it's going to take them a little while to figure out the technology. Where is he at again? What does it mean to be online? What is this app I have to download? I have to go to a website. Where do I listen? I just imagine that they're going to have a difficult time finding it. Okay. Back to SE Cup. I was in Washington, D.C. I used to go every single year for the Federation for American Immigration Reform, hold their feet to the fire rally, and they hold this every year. I don't think they do anymore. They would hold this every year as a means to bring in conservative talk show hosts from around the country to talk about the concerns about illegal immigration and then do exactly what the event was billed, to hold people's feet to the fire, Congress's feet to the fire, to do something about immigration reform. So I had her on one of the shows that I did in D.C. during that time, and this was before she had turned to the dark side, SE Cup. And we had a whole conversation where she told a story about how she started getting involved in politics, and she quickly realized that the issue of illegal immigration was one that there were obviously Democrats that didn't ever want to solve the problem, even though at the time you had Democrats sounding more, the majority of Democrats sounded more like Republicans now, right, than certainly Democrats do now regarding illegal immigration. But that also there were too many Republicans who also did not want to see anything get done regarding immigration enforcement and stopping the flood of illegal aliens coming into the country because it was too beneficial to be able to argue the point. And unfortunately, I feel like that's where we've landed with the Save America Act and shoring up our election integrity. Putting the responsibility back into the hands of the American people as best as we possibly can as the greatest nation on this planet, unfortunately, even for some Republicans, is a power that they don't want to relinquish. Because that's what it means. You shore up election integrity. You get rid of any concern over voting machines. You get rid of any concern about ballots being counted. You get rid of any concern of ballot harvesting. You remove any concern about illegal aliens voting in our elections. So you have essentially the most American citizen-driven election cycle. One, I think most of us agree we know what that outcome would end up being. It would be detrimental to Democrats. It would. That's evidence, the evidence, again, with just anecdotally what I saw across the country and what we've been talking about in terms of America 250 and the patriotism that the majority of the country holds. Even here in Minnesota, when you look at that map and it's mostly red with these concentrated blue areas. So what ultimately happens when you shore up our election integrity? You put the power back into the hands of the American people, and the American people who care the most about America. Not about an agenda, but about their futures, their children's futures, their children's children's futures. But what happens when you do that? People in elected positions of power have less power. Republicans and Democrats. People who think that they know better than you. And too often, you may think you're voting for the best person that can go and hold office, that is going to represent you and what you believe is best for you and your family. And unfortunately, too often, those people get elected and they turn on you. Because either they're influenced by Washington, D.C., they're influenced by the celebrity that comes with politics, even at the local level, even at the state level, and they end up changing and conforming. I've seen it time and time again. Democrats now use this to win elections. They say they're going to run as a moderate and tackle all these things. Amy Klobuchar, the commentary that we played earlier, she's actually talking about what she would do as governor because she knows she needs to. She's pointing to those very things that are laid out at AmericanExperiment.org, that we are on the wrong track. She's just saying it. It's just lip service. She'll tell you she's concerned that kids in Mississippi can read better than kids in Minnesota, that the majority of Minnesotans feel our state is on the wrong track, that Minnesota is now below average in terms of the state economically. 55% of the students can't do math at a grade level. Minnesota taxes small businesses more than any other state. Minnesota's government let fraudsters steal over $9 billion. These are irrefutable facts. She'll tell you she's concerned about those. She'll get into office. She won't do anything about it because she likes the power. So getting back to my point, the Save America Act is now in that same place that immigration and not having immigration reform. We don't need immigration reform. We just simply need to go and use the laws that exist. And that's what Trump has been trying to do. And look at the effort to thwart him. Look at what's happened here in Minnesota in the way that we had agents on the ground here to arrest criminal illegal aliens who had committed horrific crimes. And I have a story in the stack of a dude who's donated $29 million to help Minnesotans pay rent after the ICE surge. I'm glad that it's coming out of somebody else's pocket, but what a waste of your own money. Because it's essentially $29 million for illegal aliens, because that's the only individuals who were affected by what ICE did, apart from the lunatics that took to the streets to go and obstruct what they were doing. And maybe that's the way that we need to, getting back to the Save America Act, maybe this is how we start to reframe this. Maybe we need to start reframing this as, listen, those Republicans that don't want to pass the Save America Act, yeah, it's partly because they don't like Trump, but it's also because they don't want you to have the power to make the best decisions for you and your family by shoring up election integrity in this country. We know the Democrats don't want it. We know damn well the Democrats don't want it. But we also have too many Republicans that feel exactly the same way. They'll tell you they're for election integrity and they don't want illegal aliens voting, but they're just paying you lip service. They don't really believe it because they don't really want the American citizen in charge of our elections fully, because they end up losing power, influence, and a whole lot of money to boot. So maybe that's the way that we need to start reframing this. All right, let's go here. A cash-strapped Democrat National Committee is in a full-blown meltdown. Oh, you love to hear it. This is according to the New York Times. And you know it's bad if the New York Times is reporting on this. You know it's bad. Its chair, Ken Martin. Oh, there's a name that I have not heard in a long time. A long time. Ken Martin descending into fear and a growing sense of paranoia about his job security. Oh, you hate to hear it. Listen, again, I don't wish anybody lose their job, including their own. That being said, just like me, I chose to be a talk show host. I knew the dangers that come with it. Ken Martin, you left the state to be the chair of the DNC. You knew what you were getting into, dude. Facing a cash crunch, the Democrat National Committee has asked vendors to hold off on sending bills until after the midterms. The Times reported an unusual move, exposing the party's financial struggles with just a few months before the November election. Making matters worse, you've got Democrat Socialists of America out there talking to mainstream media. They're going on Fox News, for crying out loud. And they are not holding back on what their platform stands for. Listen to this clip from Fox News just over the course of the past few days. This is DSA co-chair Megan Romer confirming their party platform. Give this a listen here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
So we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform, and I want to ask you, just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate. True. Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them. Yep. Abolish ICE. Absolutely. Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally. As a long-term plan, yep. Defund the Pentagon. Absolutely. Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
Okay, so no prisons. Government or public ownership of most large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any sensible Democrat watching or listening to that in a position of power has got to be sitting back going, no, stop. No, shut up already. But this is what the Democrat Party has become. They've allowed their party to be infiltrated by a bunch of radicals. And they're now the most vocal component of the Democrat Party, and they feel helpless to push back against it. Case in point, Tim Kaine talking to Fox News. He is welcoming socialism into the Democrat Party.
The Atlantic, though, has this headline saying the DSA is a parasite. They add if the Democrats want to root out the party within their party, they will need to stop indulging the DSA's constant passive-aggressive attempts to undermine them. This would require prohibiting DSA members from joining their party and throwing out the DSA members already honeycombed within it. Do you think they have a space within your party?
I do think the Democratic Party has always been known, and mostly this is good, sometimes it's not, as a Big Tent. And so I don't think that somebody says, I'm a DSA candidate, I don't think you should use that to throw them out. Why would you do that? Candidates have to rise and fall on their own merits. And so, you know, whether you're a DSA member or a third-way Democrat or, you know, I just call myself a small D Democrat, people have to put their platform before voters and try to be responsive to voters, and voters get to judge them. But to have a litmus test that if somebody says, hey, I'm a DSA member, you know, they can't be part of the party, I strongly disagree with that.
You know what? I'll give Tim Kaine some credit there for moving it over to a different issue than what she actually asked. Nobody was talking about removing the DSA candidates from the party. It was basically, hey, do you have an issue with these individuals who are now dominating your party? Mm-hmm. NBC's Steve Kornacki, sharing some recent polling data on the issue, had this to say.
We've been seeing it in the primary season. Socialists winning Democratic primaries, candidates from the far left. And look at this here. Among Democrats, this is that Fox poll, a majority have a favorable view of socialism. Step outside the Democratic Party, it's a totally different world. Look at independence, socialism, deeply unpopular there.
Caroline Leavitt, a White House press secretary, also talking with Fox News, probably made one of the best comments as of late regarding the rise of the Democrat socialists within the party.
The party has totally capitulated to the communists within their ranks. Communism has never worked, and it's very scary that a major political party in this country, the Democrat Party, is being controlled by communists. And their only real answer to any problem is to just take more from the individuals who make that country great and give it to the government. You know, it sounds great to have free food, free health care, free rent, but who's paying for all of that? We are. You will be. It's easy to sell, but it doesn't work. And I think, unfortunately, so many people in this country are falling for it because of our liberal, biased education system. We live in the best country in the history of the world. That's what our children should be taught. That's why so many people from all over this world are dying to come here, literally traveling from all over the world because they believe in the promise of the American dream that was built on capitalism, on the free market, on small business enterprise, and all of that will go away if we turn into a communist state. History tells us so.
Yeah, she's absolutely correct. All right, before we wrap up the show for a Monday, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in today, I got one more story that I want to check out regarding, that I want to share with you regarding Governor Jim
very
Walz.
good. Very good.
All right, before we do that, though, let's go back to the talkbacks. Oop, I did it. Isaac, that was the only time this morning I said the word. There's been much debate in my household of what we call these things. I don't think there's any sort of ownership. I don't think it's like I don't think it's copyrighted by my previous employer. I just don't want to say it. That's why I've been calling it the comment line. So the comment line number is 612-584-4565, 612-584-4565. And if you want to email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. That's my email address.
Hey, John. Great show so far. This is Rick in Rosemount. Really glad to hear you on this air again. I was really looking forward to hearing you talk about what happened to you during the past month, like how you lost your job, how you got this job, and what's been happening besides your vacation. But you're running out of time, I know. So great to hear you. Hope you tell us the story.
Rick, I did that over the course of 6 hours in the episodes that I recorded last week that are available on the podcast right now. And I take that moment to let everybody know because, again, I think there was, and there still has been quite a bit of confusion over what we're doing here. So it is essentially the John Justice Show as you knew it with everything and more, just not the terrestrial radio signal. So, of course, you can listen live as you are right now. You can do that at americanexperiment.org. You can do that by downloading the free MixLR app. Also, we are, you can watch the show on X. You can watch the show on Facebook, both my feed and American Experiment's feed as well, and of course it's up on YouTube. So last week I did 2 episodes. They were our dry and run episodes. They're available via the podcast right now, and the videos are available now up on YouTube. They'll be available on Rumble as well. There were some audio issues during those shows. We've hopefully resolved those issues moving forward, but you can go and listen to those podcasts, and today's show will be podcasted as well once we wrap up the show. So you'll be able to continue to get caught up with the show if you weren't, didn't have the ability to listen to it live just like you did before. You already got rid of that other app from that other place that I used to work at. Just go and replace it on your phone with the MixLR app or head on over to americanexperiment.org and you can listen directly from there. But, Rick, I told the entire story of what had happened with my previous employer and my road trip, so all that you need to do is head on over and give that a listen up on the podcast. All right, so let's wrap up with this. Out of the New York Post, they're dolling up the trans agenda and taxpayers are footing the bill. First of their kind transgender dolls, complete with removable genitalia, will debut in some Minnesota classrooms this fall to kids as young as 4 years old. This is beyond wrong. Beyond wrong. This is the exploitation of children. And if you had any individual handing this material to a random child on the street, they'd probably be locked up. But because it's falling under the guise of public education, they're able to go and get away with it, and they should not be able to go and get away with it. The paper dolls with gender-neutral names like Sam, Rory, Avery, and Parker have removable internal and external genitals along with more than 100 interchangeable pieces of clothing, accessories, and hairstyles like a trans Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. Listen, if there's a store that partakes in or that sells ridiculous adult nonsense and they want to put this in their stores for parents to purchase to give to their kids, go for it. What you do in your own home, that is up to you. But this should not be anywhere near our public education system. And yet Governor Jim Walz has signed off on this. The goal, they say, is for kids to learn about the different options that exist for who they can be, according to a therapist at the University of Minnesota Medical School, which spent over half a decade developing the controversial project funded by Minnesota Governor Jim Walz. the Medical Schools Institute for Sexual and Gender Health Research, over those 6 years, included paying $20 to $60 for trans and gender diverse children and their parents to play with the dolls and talk about gender and bodies in groups. These children are going to be scarred for life. Prototypes of the dolls were shown at a 2024 news conference, where one named San can be seen in what appears to be a phase of gender transition, with a detachable penis off to the side, and a dress and a girl's underwear within reach. I'm uncomfortable even talking about this on the show. The trans dolls, which promise to make gender fun, will be made available to teachers, schools, counselors, and pediatricians and mental health providers, according to a website, My Gender Dolls. It features an image of a boy doll wearing a dress and others in various states of sexual identity confusion. It's not known whether parents or children themselves will be able to order the doll or if they will only be marketed to professionals and schools. It's not known if parents will be able to opt out of such therapeutic play for their kids. I hope the lawsuits come swiftly against any school district that attempts to go and include this material within their curriculum, if that indeed ends up taking place. This is truly disturbing. The Democrats want your kids indoctrinated at the earliest age possible. Parents want to teach this in the privacy of their own home. Go for it. But it should not be in our public school system. It's there by design and is the reason why terms like grooming exist. The dolls began as a University of Minnesota research project and was later spun into a commercial venture, My Gender Dolls, by two licensed psychologists who are professionals at the medical school. The website does not reveal the cost of the paper dolls, but the University of Minnesota's medical school has been receiving $15 million annually in funding from the state via WALS, cash earmarked to increase the medical school's research capacity and ensure its national presence. But the school doesn't report how much it funnels into its Institute for Sexual and Gender Health, which has a total research budget of $1.4 million, according to a report from 2025. Walls, who's pushed his pro-transgender policies on the Midwestern state, was bestowed the Institute's inaugural Distinguished Sexual and Gender Health Champion Award in 2023. That was a title that was created just for him.
And all the creatures, from the bats to the bugs, covered old Fluff with kisses and hugs.
Other therapists from the university's medical school said they used the dolls to get kids talking about their private parts. It's pedophilia. It's child exploitation. It's child endangerment. We were able to explore and brainstorm not just what our bodies are able to do, but what we want our bodies to do and look like in the future. Does it get any more dystopian than that? Critics say the dolls are being misused by adults, you think, who want to push their ideologies on vulnerable children. They will find anybody who's in trouble and use this as a tool to say, this is why you're unhappy. This is absolutely grooming, slammed Dr. Quentin Van Meter, past president of the American College of Pediatricians. The younger kids, many of them still believe in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. And then you're presenting them with paper dolls that kind of look fun, and you can change their clothing, their hair, their genitals. It's well beyond their ability to sort out fantasy from reality. When reached by the Post, the university spokesperson claimed that no public funds were used to support the My Gender Dolls commercialization efforts. But when pressed on how much taxpayer money went into research to develop the dolls and to the salaries the professors involved in the project, the university refused to answer, telling the Post instead to file a Freedom of Information request. Of course, Governor Tim Walz's office did not return the Post's request for comment. The man cannot leave office soon enough. He is an evil and vile individual. All right. Before we wrap things up, I got two things that I want to share with you really quick. President Donald Trump talking at a recent event, and he ended up mentioning Ilhan Omar's name. And I thought I'd share this with you. I thought it was relevant to us here in Minnesota. Here is the president from, I believe, over the weekend.
Between California's policies of enabling wildfires, paying drug addicts to be homeless, giving free sex changes to illegals, and telling rich people they're going to take away, all of your money is going to be taken away. People are fleeing, and they're fleeing in droves. We can't have that in this country. It's becoming such a horrible and dangerous location that Ilhan Omar, one of my favorites, and her brother are thinking about moving together, very much in love. A video has surfaced recently of Ilhan giving a speech referring to World War II as World War XI. And they asked her about that. She thought she got it right. But I'm not surprised, because she's a low IQ person, and she's also a very dishonest person, and she ought to get the hell out of our country. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be in our country. She also calls her brother husband number one. Omar is reportedly being investigated for fraud. She revised her net worth. I was shocked to see that she was worth much more than $30 million. And then when the press got on her, she revised it slightly downward to less than $18,000. So she went from much more than $30 million to $18,000.
President Donald Trump talking Ilhan Omar. As we wrap up the debut show, the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Again, thank you to Center of the American Experiment for sharing in my vision for this latest iteration of the show. And thank you to everybody who's been so supportive over the past month, everybody that came out to the America 250 event that took place on Saturday, brought to you by Center of the American Experiment. Tomorrow on the show, we'll be back at it live at 6 o'clock. Trump's border czar says vetting of ICE officer under internal review after the Maine shooting. We'll dive into further immigration issues and bring you all the latest Minnesota news of the day. As we wrap up the show today, I thought, you know what? You don't hear it very often, but let's go ahead and close the debut show out with the full version of Zima Fizz. If you want to leave a comment overnight on the comment line, 612-584-4565. You can also drop me an email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I look forward to hearing from you between now and tomorrow morning. And as we go out on our debut show, again, let's go ahead and share with you. For those that haven't heard the whole version in a long time, plus I made a little video to go along with it for those that are watching online. Here is Zima Fizz. God bless to you, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m.
Thanks, everybody. You guys are the best.
Static waves at dawn, a voice that lingers when night is gone. Twin cities hum with stories spun. John Justice rides the rising sun.